My Marvel superhero girlfriend. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 126, Challenge to Iron Man. Zzzz. The gap in the ceiling, melted by the heat released by the human explosion, burned red. The semi-deified Nian, bathing in the bright moonlight pouring in through the gap, looked like a god. Who are you? Everyone, be careful. He possesses extraordinary abilities. Accompanied by a flurry of nervous chatter and hurried footsteps, a dozen strong young men rushed in from the car wash's upper floors and outside the main entrance. They wielded firearms, knives, and iron rods, surrounding Nian, who stood in the middle of the car wash. Of course, even then, they maintained a nervous distance of about 10 meters. Among them, a young man with dyed green hair, resembling a follower of Lorna, stepped forward with a rifle, his eyes slightly red. He angrily demanded, "Why did you come out of Boss Lorna's room?" Nian glanced at them calmly, his silver eyes devoid of emotion. His divine nature guided him to handle matters with the calmest and simplest of manners. "Try shooting," Nian suddenly said to the most agitated young man with the green hair. "Do you think I dare not shoot?" The green-haired young man trembled with anger, impulsively releasing the safety on his rifle. "Eddie, calm down." Seeing the silver-haired young man's fearless demeanor, some people began to persuade him. "Hurry up. If you don't shoot now, you won't have another chance," Nian urged, stepping towards the armed young man. "You're looking for death?" Seeing his fellow accomplices step back, the green-haired young man, known as Eddie, could no longer hold back. He aimed his gun at Nian, who was approaching, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot rang out. As everyone in the car wash watched in disbelief, the silver-haired young man quickly raised his left hand. A silver bracelet, like a gauntlet, gleamed from it. A faint spark of fire flashed from it, evidently having blocked the rifle bullet. "How is this possible?" Ed continued to pull the trigger in fear. Nian did not stop his forward steps. As he did so, his left hand swung rapidly back and forth, leaving after images beyond human vision. 2 or 3 flashes of fire shone on the silver bracelet, and fragments of shattered bullets fell to the ground nearby. Before Eduk could fire again, Nian had already reached Eduk. With his right hand, he grasped the scorching rifle barrel. With a force from his fingers and wrist, the metal instantly bent and scrapped into an S shape. Eduk's face paled with fear, and he slunk back on the ground. "Do you understand? The weapons in your hands pose no threat to me." The demigod's Nian threw away the now crumbled gun and addressed the equally pale-faced members around him. "Now, can we sit down and talk?" 10 minutes later. Late at night, inside the car wash, the parked cars had been moved elsewhere, leaving a large open space where 20 or 30 benches were placed. At this moment, all of Lorna's men, regardless of gender, even the most sturdy and ferocious, sat quietly on their stools, like elementary school students receiving instruction. In front of them, Nian, now wearing a pair of high-top canvas shoes, stood there. It had to be said that Master Ancient One's method was quite effective. No matter how much he explained, it was better to let them try. When they realized that their weapons and equipment posed no threat to the person before them, and that the being before them could easily destroy them, they could smoothly enter the conversation. "Well, this was definitely not a threat. So you're one of us, too? Why didn't you say so earlier?" The green-haired young man sitting at the front sighed with relief. "Let me correct you, I'm not one of you." Nian shrugged. "I'm only on Lorna's side. Your life or death is none of my business. And whoever dares to harm Lorna will suffer the same fate as the intruder just now." Under Nian's radiant eyes, no one dared to look him in the eye, and some of them lowered their heads in guilt. The move Nian had just made was specifically for the purpose of shocking them. He wanted to let them know that there were other people with extraordinary abilities hiding behind Luna. This way, even if Luna were to encounter the same situation as today again, if they wanted to attack her, they would have to be wary of Nian, who was in his demigod mode. Nian asked bluntly, "You saw it just now. The intruder's target was Luna, And the man behind him was called Killian. Does anyone know someone named Killian? Killian. Hearing this name, the expressions of many people on the scene changed. Edok blurted out excitedly, Killian, it turned out to be the damn bastard. He actually dared to attack Boss Luna. Do you know him? Nian said. Edok nodded quickly and said, that guy came to see Boss Lorna 3 months ago. It seemed like he was doing some kind of experimental research. I don't know what they talked about exactly, but I just remember that Boss and him didn't reach a cooperation agreement that time. Nian narrowed his eyes and continued to ask, do you know where he is? Edok replied helplessly, I only know that he's from a biotechnology company in Los Angeles, but I don't know anything else. Los Angeles. Nian pondered for a moment, then casually asked, has anything special happened in Los Angeles recently? Special events? There really has. Edok shouted. He stood up and ran to a car outside. He quickly retrieved a newspaper and handed it to Nian. It was today's New York Evening Post. Nian glanced at the date on the paper, flipped through it a few times, and his eyes fell on the prominent second section of the newspaper. This morning, a terrorist organization claiming to be a Jewish leader hacked into a local Los Angeles radio and television station and used it to broadcast a video threatening murder. This devastating incident has caused panic in downtown Los Angeles, and the U.S. cabinet has announced that it has dispatched a war machine to deal with it. That same day at noon, Tony Stark's personal driver, Mr. Happy, was attacked by a suicide bomber in Los Angeles. He is in critical condition and has been taken to Los Angeles First Hospital for treatment. This is like a direct challenge from the terrorists to Iron Man. Tony Stark publicly declared war on the Jewish terrorist organization at the hospital entrance and, as Iron Man, detailed the address of his beachfront villa in Los Angeles in front of numerous media cameras. The demigod's Nian read the newspaper in less than 2 or 3 seconds. Having experienced the scene of the suicide bomber in the newspaper, he immediately recognized it as similar to the scene caused by the bald man's self-explosion. Clearly, the forces that launched the raid on Lorna tonight were the same ones that caused the terrorist attacks in Los Angeles. A cold glint flashed in the eyes of the demigod Nian. He could have ignored the other party provoking Iron Man, but he also attacked Luna at the same time. Maybe he was tired of living? Chapter 127 One Night. Very good. Now that we know who's behind the attack on Luna, and that they're part of a terrorist organization, things become much simpler. However, before we deal with that matter, Nian glanced at the 20 or so members present and suddenly said, anyone among you who has secretly sided with Killian, please come forward. Everyone inside the car wash was stunned by this statement. Edok took a deep breath and said solemnly, are you saying there's a traitor among us? Nian nodded. He didn't believe the bald man could have entered the car wash and reached Luna's room without help from someone inside, and besides, if Luna wasn't suffering from any health issues, then even with his abilities like self-healing, high temperature, and self-destruction, he wouldn't have been able to harm her. Therefore, the fact that the opposing force chose this moment for a surprise attack indirectly confirmed the information they'd received from within. Knowing that Luna might not be in good health, he sent one of his men to test the waters. Who's the traitor? No way. Everyone on the field looked at each other in bewilderment. Suddenly, everyone looked like a traitor, and everyone was filled with fear. In this situation, even checking cell phones and surveillance cameras might still prove difficult to pinpoint. No need to guess. I can easily tell who the traitor is. The semi-deified Nian waved his hand, and a golden light suddenly emerged from the air, extending into the air like a tiny dragon, landing first on Edok. Are you a traitor? Nian asked him. No, Edok replied flatly. Then you're not. Nian nodded gently, continuing to cast the lasso of truth on the person next to him. Thus, the question and answer session began. Are you a traitor? No. Are you a traitor? No, not. This scene seemed a bit comical and bizarre. After all, would that traitor directly admit to being a mole? But when the lasso of truth landed on a woman, Nian mechanically continued to ask, are you a traitor? Bound by the shimmering golden robe, a divine light flashed in the woman's eyes, and she replied, I am. Everyone on the field was stunned. Is this even possible? Being bound by the lasso of truth makes it impossible to lie. This is the most intractable aspect of this artifact. Do you have any accomplices? Who are they? Nian continued to ask. There are 2 accomplices, and they were the first to defect to Killian. Their names are Dude Samuel and Marin Jeremy. Before the woman could finish her words, on the field, the two burly men sitting in the back row's faces dropped. With expressions of terror, they rose from their seats and quickly fled towards the car wash's main entrance. However, before they could escape the car wash, a golden lasso flashed through the air like lightning, encircling them and binding them together. Nian grabbed the other end of the lasso of truth and, with a simple tug, sent the two grown men flying backwards. Nian, holding the rope with one hand, dangled the two bound men in the air. He lowered his gaze and asked, "Tell me, why did Killian want to kill Lorna?" Among the two men was an acquaintance, the thug who had chased Pete the previous time. "I don't know. He didn't tell me," the thug replied, a look of confusion in his eyes. The other man spoke up. "Killian believes Lorna possesses a very strange mutant gene. So, he tried to get her to cooperate and provide her blood for his own human experiments. But Lorna refused. Later, Killian secretly contacted us, saying that if the opportunity arose, we would work together to eliminate Lorna and send her body over." At this point, Eddick finally lost control. His eyes blazed with fury, and he punched the man in the face, knocking out several teeth. The other members' eyes also showed a ferocious look. Traitors were definitely something they hated the most. "These three traitors, I leave them to you to deal with." Nian put away the lasso of truth, threw down his sentence, and walked towards the escalator on the side. Behind him, the sound of painful wails continued to ring out. Nian no longer paid attention to the situation in the car wash. He quickly returned to a dark room. The little emperor made a meow sound and jumped forward, landing on his shoulder quickly and lightly. "Well done, I'll reward you with canned fish when you go back." Nian praised, and then his eyes fell on the bed. The green-haired girl lying there also opened her eyes in due time. "How do you feel?" Nian asked in a young voice. Luna responded sweetly, a rare moment of docility. "I'm not dizzy anymore, and I'm not hot anymore, I just don't have much energy. You just need to rest for a day or two," Nian said, sitting down beside the bed. "Just now outside." "I heard it," Luna said. "I didn't expect there would be three traitors." "Rest well, I'll handle it." Nian thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "I'll have Xia Ahuang and Guan Lo stay with you to protect you. Now that the traitor has been found, you'll be safe here." Luna asked bluntly, "You mean you want to go to Los Angeles?" Nian nodded. Since the other party had attacked Luna, and was a terrorist, there was nothing to worry about. He wanted to use his demigod mode, which he still maintained, to take down the other party in one fell swoop. A warm and cool hand suddenly tugged at the corner of Nian's clothes, and he said, whether in a commanding or coquettish tone, "Little brother, don't leave me, at least tonight." Nian lowered his head to meet those emerald eyes, unable to refuse. It was the first time he had seen the powerful Luna show such weakness. Luna said weakly, "Tomorrow, I should be almost fully recovered. Then I'll go to Los Angeles myself to resolve this matter." "How can that be?" Nian sighed helplessly. "Then tomorrow, let's go to Los Angeles together." Although he wouldn't be in demigod mode tomorrow, with Xia Ahuang around, he could still transform into other modes. Or, he could let Luna recover. In short, Nian didn't want Luna to face the unknown danger alone. "Then it's settled, little brother." The green-haired girl turned over, her back to Nian outside, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. Going to Los Angeles to deal with the enemy forces was just a side job. What Luna truly wanted was for Nian to stay by her side a little longer. Even if it was just for one day. Elsewhere, late at night, at Nian's home, a crimson-haired girl in white pajamas, clutching a pink pillow, gently opened the door to the middle room. She gazed at the figure lying on the bed in the darkness, approached, and whispered, "Master, are you cold?" The person on the bed didn't respond. "Falling asleep," the crimson girl muttered, somewhat disappointed. She clutched her pillow and left the room, carefully closing the door. Silence fell once more. A slight shift in the bed revealed a mature, graceful woman's form beneath the covers. Diana opened her beautiful eyes. She rested her head on her larger pillow, cradling a regular-sized one in her arms, which she held between her legs, which stretched from beneath her white gauze dress. Between her long, slender legs, Nian's pillow began to deform slightly. Chapter 128 Ancient One arrives, two sisters. The next day, Saturday, was at Nian's house. Wanda didn't need to set the alarm, Her biological clock had already trained her to wake up early and begin her day's work diligently. After washing and changing into her daily clothes, the girl's first act was to go to the second room and wake Nian. However, when she opened the door and entered, the boy's bed was empty. Miss Diana, who had also left home, had left a message, saying that Nian had gone to a friend's house and might not return until tonight or tomorrow. A friend's house? Which friend could it be? And why hadn't he told her last night that he'd been out so early this morning? Wanda couldn't help but ponder, a look of disappointment crossing her face. But she quickly pulled herself together and, while Nian was away, cleaned the house thoroughly. The exclusive classes at school were cancelled today. Wanda remembered that Nian had said someone would pick her up at 10 a.m. to go to other things. So, after breakfast, Wanda began cleaning the kitchen, bathroom, and living room. She also put the quilt, pillows, and clothes in Nian's room into the washing machine for batches of washing and drying. What's this? The Crimson Girl squatted in front of Nian's closet, peering at the bottom drawer in confusion. She opened and picked up a white shirt, revealing two unusual bodysuits underneath. One was a black and white hooded bodysuit with a web and white spider logo. The other was a pure black cape bodysuit with a distinct S-shaped totem on the chest. Wanda wasn't someone who didn't pay attention to the daily news. It could be said that after her housekeeper training, her exposure to the latest news media far surpassed that of Nian, who simply read according to his mood. So when she saw the two inconsistent suits, she immediately connected them to the recent events. Nian was no ordinary person, Wanda had always known that. For example, he was able to single-handedly rescue himself from a rebel 5 meters below, and for the strange discoloration of his hair that sometimes occurred. Wanda silently returned the white shirt to the closet and covered herself with the two tights. She felt strangely sad, not because Nian was hiding something from her, but because she, as a maid or housekeeper, had been unable to offer even the slightest help in certain areas. This was undoubtedly a grave dereliction of duty. Just as Wanda was thinking this, she suddenly heard a strange noise coming from the living room outside. Wanda realized it was already 10 o'clock in the morning, the time Nian had said someone would pick her up for class. She hurried out of the room and into the living room, where she was stunned. In the middle of the living room, sparks swirled, forming a strange circular portal in the air. Standing before it was a bald woman with her hands behind her back, her face serene and her face kind. The bald woman's age was indeterminate, and she smiled as she gazed at Wanda as she emerged from the room. "Hello, Wanda Django Maximoff," she said, her expression serene. "Hello. Are you the teacher the young master mentioned?" Wanda asked instinctively. "Teacher?" Ancient One pondered for a moment, then shook his head. "Not really. I only accepted Nian as my student, but he didn't want to learn, so I asked you to do it for him. So, you don't have to call me teacher, just call me Master Ancient One. Learning can be replaced. Master really is." Wanda felt a strong sense of sarcasm in her heart, but she still said earnestly and obediently, "I will study hard for you, young master." Ancient One gave her a deep look, turned, and walked through the portal behind him. "Follow me." Wanda, unfazed, took a step and followed him through the portal. After Ancient One and Wanda entered the portal, the rapidly rotating Martian portal began to shrink until only a tiny spark remained, extinguished in the empty living room. Los Angeles. The largest city in the western United States, it has always been known as the City of Angels. Even Iron Man Tony Stark built a luxurious oceanfront villa here. There are no permanently resident superheroes in the area. Strangely, precisely because of this absence, it has been one of the few cities, aside from New York, Gotham City, Metropolis, and Washington, D.C., to avoid major supernatural events in recent years. Meanwhile, on a Los Angeles main thoroughfare, a bus was speeding toward the city center. In the back row sat a green-haired girl, about 13, and a black-haired boy, in his early 16s. The black-haired boy was clutching a backpack, only half-zipped, containing a small orange cat in a glass jar. It was Lorna, and Nian, who had already exited demigod mode. Boss Polaris, could you please stop holding my hand?" Nian asked in a low voice. "Why, are you shy about this?" Lorna said casually, her tone a little weak. "No, I'm afraid." Nian's eye twitched, and he again felt the strange looks from many on the bus. After all, it was obvious that the two were not brother and sister. When Lorna wasn't wearing her usual smoky makeup, her delicate face was flawless and fair, like a doll. Sitting on a chair with her feet dangling in the air, she looked every bit the inexperienced young woman. Nian, on the other hand, didn't look particularly old, and with his baseball cap and mask on, he looked a bit suspicious walking alongside Lorna. Nian wanted to assert that, compared to the gangster next to him, he was the inexperienced one. The car lurched slightly. Lorna frowned and muttered, "Hey, little bro, I need some candy." "Wait a minute." Nian immediately pulled a lollipop from his pocket and peeled back the colorful plastic wrapping. He was about to offer the candy stick to Lorna, but she had released her hands but then placed them in her trouser pockets, her pink mouth gesturing in a cool, unassuming manner. "He's the boss, and he's also a patient." Nian endured it, gently placing the lollipop into her mouth. Her pink, snake-like tongue curled flexibly, and Lorna took the candy in her mouth, puffing on it like a cigarette, then narrowed her eyes in delight. Nian was just putting the candy wrapper into his pocket when he heard Lorna, holding a lollipop, say, "Would you like a bite?" Nian looked at the candy, coated in a shimmering, watery sheen, and shook his head. As if sensing something, Lorna took a lollipop again and whispered, "Isn't this enough? Is that the only way to gain powers?" "Pretty much." Nian didn't know how to explain it. His powers required not only the exchange of fluids but also physical contact. So, simply having fluids wasn't enough. "Would you like a bite?" Lorna said nonchalantly, sticking out her tongue. "Don't you need it right now?" "Not yet." Nian flatly declined. He was afraid that if he did that, he'd quickly become a two-star player in this city. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129: The Invisible Person, Fusion. The bus continued toward downtown Los Angeles, with tall buildings gradually increasing on both sides of the main thoroughfare. He suddenly felt a pressure on his right shoulder. He glanced sideways and saw Lorna, drowsy, her eyes closed, her green-haired head resting on his shoulder, the remains of a candy stick in her mouth. The sunlight streaming through the window cast a delicate, innocent look on her face. "This boss, are you sure you're here to fight Chaofen? And not just for fun?" He was a little speechless, but he let Lorna sleep against him for a while. Lorna hadn't fully recovered yet, and it was unclear how much of her abilities she could still use. Therefore, to deal with a potential terrorist organization, Nian decided to deal with it on his own. He now had three options. The first was to allow the young yuan-devouring beast, Xiao Wang, to bite him, then parasitize Xiao Wang, transforming once again into his 3-in-1 Venom Nian Cat mode. With the power of this 3-in-1 mode, he could crush any cyborg or terrorist organization. However, this strategy carries the risk of losing control, and its dark, sinister nature makes it unsuitable for simultaneously caring for a small patient like Lorna. Furthermore, if the Triad appeared in this city, Iron Man would likely attack it first. Secondly, he could allow the Venom in the Devourer to directly parasitize him, and then, as a symbiote, he could parasitize Lorna. This would be more than powerful enough and allow Lorna to satisfy the thrill of personal revenge. However, there's still the problem: Lorna is currently extremely weak, and Nian doesn't intend to count her among his forces. While others might see Lorna as a transcendental leader, Nian sees her as just a girl in need of protection. Of course, if Lorna knew what Nian was thinking, she'd be furious. The final option is to acquire Lorna's abilities himself. With the inherent strength of Lorna's abilities, Nian could easily handle any alien event short of the scale of the Battle of New York, provided he used them normally. Nian suddenly looked down, gazing at the girl's lips, glistening and translucent in the sunlight, from the syrup she had just applied. "Well, let me reiterate, he's not a pervert." The bus continued on its way, and as it approached a river-crossing bridge, traffic began to build, and the speed slowed. Near the middle of the bridge, the bus came to a complete standstill, surrounded by a gridlock of cars, and some impatient drivers were already honking their horns. Nian frowned, feeling a dull heat pouring into the car through the window. It was sunny outside, and even though it was still February, it felt like a scorching summer. Tick-tock. A drop of sweat dripped from Nian's chin. He looked down and saw that his palms were also visibly sweaty. He wasn't the only one feeling the heat. Many passengers on the bus began to wipe their sweat with tissues, cursing and complaining. Nian glanced at Luna next to him. She was still snoring and didn't seem to feel the heat. There was no sweat on her body. I have to say that the girl looked very well behaved when she was asleep. Another 5 minutes passed. The traffic jam on the bridge showed no signs of loosening, and it was getting worse and worse. The driver simply opened the door of the bus to ventilate, and many people got off the bus outside. Nian, something is wrong. At this time, Guan Luo's spiritual thoughts suddenly came over. What did you sense? Nian narrowed his eyes and asked solemnly. It's not clear yet. The distance is a bit far. I need to get closer. Guan Luo continued to transmit the voice. What's wrong? Luna also woke up, opened her eyes, and asked in a daze. You sit in the car, don't move, I'll go down and take a look. Nian was about to get up, but Luna hugged his arm. I told you not to leave me, the green-haired girl snorted. Besides, don't you need me in this crucial moment? Then let's go together. Knowing he couldn't persuade Luna, Nian simply took her out of the car and onto the heavily trafficked bridge. A glance revealed a bustling crowd of pedestrians, converging toward the center of the bridge. Looks like there's a car accident up ahead. Let's go check it out. It's scorching hot in the car. Hey, guys, let's go ahead and take a video. Passers-by whispered past Nian, their faces brimming with excitement. Guan Luo, you're noticing the car accident up ahead? Nian asked quietly, backpack slung over his shoulder. Guan Luo replied, it's the direction of the accident, not the accident itself. There's something else going on there. Then let's stay in the car. Nian was self-aware, believing he had a natural tendency to attract transcendents, especially those of the opposite sex, so it was best not to actively cause trouble. Unexpectedly, Luna's jewel-like eyes flickered, and she asked curiously, what's going on up ahead? Little brother, let's go check it out. With that, Luna's frail body struggled to pull Nian forward. Nian couldn't do anything about Luna, figuring that if it was truly extraordinary, he wouldn't be able to easily avoid it, so he followed the crowd. Nearing the center of the Cross River Bridge, Nian saw several wrecked and overturned vehicles on the bridge ahead. The overturned cars practically blocked the bridge, contributing to the traffic jam. On both sides of the crash site, a large crowd formed a human wall, watching and taking photos. Little brother, look to the right, what's that? Luna suddenly pointed toward the side of the crash site. Nian followed her finger, his eyes widening. It was a bald, shirtless, muscular man. Unlike ordinary humans, his arms, upper body, and even his face, his body and muscles, were like solid brownstone, making his tall, burly body appear rough and bloated, his face in appearance somewhat frightening. Stoneman? Before Nian could even consider, Guan Luo mentally spoke, another strange being is approaching this way. Where? Nian glanced around, seeing no one approaching. Suddenly, a bizarre scene unfolded. The onlookers in front of Nian gasped in surprise, as if nudged by an invisible presence. A passageway opened in both directions. Nian couldn't avoid it, and collided head-on with a soft, proud body. The cushioned form softened the impact, and a faint woman's cry echoed in the air ahead. Someone, Lorna observed, her eyes filled with curiosity. Invisible. Who's here? Nian instinctively reached out with his left hand, grasping a warm, supple mass. It felt incredibly smooth and moist, like a woman's slender, unfathomable waist. Let go. The invisible woman cried in embarrassment and panic. Oh, sorry. Nian immediately retracted his left hand, but to his surprise, his palm became fused with the other person's body. As he retracted his hand, he also pulled the other person's body towards him. Bang! Nian fell backward onto the bridge foundation, and the invisible figure followed suit, lying on his chest. Then the boy's body disappeared from the spot. Chapter 130 Invisibility. Nian collapsed back onto the pavement, a slight pain in his chest. A sleek, flexible body pressed against him, and he could clearly feel the pressure on his chest, causing his jacket to flatten slightly. He opened his eyes, facing the glaring sunlight, and was immediately stunned again. Strands of golden hair suddenly appeared in the air near him. And it wasn't just hair. Following them was a flawless, beautiful face, delicate collarbones, smooth, slender shoulders, and a graceful, alluring curve of the back and hips. Most importantly, there was nothing to hide. The mysterious female figure, pressing against Nian's body, should have been invisible, but now, in the sunlight, it was revealed. Ah, ah, ah. The woman looked to be around 25 years old. Her face and figure were top-notch, rivaling any cover model, and she possessed the intellectual beauty of an urban professional. The woman seemed to have barely registered the fact that she was already visible to Nian. Her soft, beautiful eyebrows knitted slightly as she braced herself on the ground beside her, trying to rise. Her golden hair cascaded down in front of her. Now I can see even more. Nian's heartbeat quickened, and he quickly averted his gaze. But they were so close together that his peripheral vision still captured the adrenaline-pumping scenery. "Little brother, are you here?" Next to Nian, Luna, wearing black leggings and a white t-shirt, crouched down. She curiously gazed at the spot where Nian had fallen, her eyes scanning carefully from side to side. Her large, emerald eyes, bright and clear, reflected no trace of the boy. "I'm right in front of you. Can't you see me?" Nian asked instinctively. "Yes. I can't see you. Not even a shadow, but I can feel you're here," Luna nodded in response. Even he was invisible? Nian was stunned as the invisible woman in front of him made a move to stand. With his hand still gripping her waist, she fell back into his arms. Nian gasped. The invisible woman wasn't heavy, but she was an adult after all. Dozens of pounds of impact would be too much for his average physique. Perhaps this was what it meant to experience both pain and pleasure. "Don't let go," the invisible woman gritted her teeth and said to Nian. "I can't let go," Nian replied with a wry smile. Nian tried to forcefully withdraw his left hand again, but his palm seemed to be fixed to the woman's waist, his fingers gripping the soft, tender flesh like a suction cup. It was as if an invisible force connected their bodies. "Stop grabbing," the invisible woman said in pain. "Stand up with me." "No problem." The invisible Nian and the invisible woman coordinated, struggling to stand up together. They didn't touch each other, fearing that other parts of their bodies would become connected again. However, once the other person stood up, there was virtually nothing left to hide from Nian. Add to that the sheer number of onlookers, and the clamor of the crowds gathered around, and the beautiful body, bathed in the golden sunlight unhindered, was now in full view. This was too humiliating. Nian couldn't bear it anymore. "Susan, are you over here?" Following the passage that had just separated the crowd, a white man in a suit and tie and a stylishly dressed white youth ran over, the latter clutching a pile of women's clothing. "I'm here, next to a black-haired boy," the invisible woman known as Susan called back. Following the sound, the two arrived at where the invisible woman and Nian were. "I can't believe you let me use my powers like this," Susan grumbled, somewhat embarrassed, and began taking the clothes from the white youth, bending slightly to put them on one by one. Nian turned aside. "Sister, stop complaining. Did we make it here successfully?" The white young man shrugged. Despite his buzz cut, he was still incredibly handsome, tall and handsome, a bit like Captain America, Steve Rogers. "Johnny, shut up. This experience is enough once," Susan said bitterly. "Didn't you say there was a boy next to you? Why didn't I see him?" The white man next to him suddenly asked curiously. "How could that be? He's standing right next to you." Susan was pulling her pants up her legs when she glanced at Nian, and her eyes met with a black-haired boy's. The air suddenly became awkward. After a 2-second pause, Susan, who hadn't yet broken her invisibility, opened her mouth in surprise and said, "No way, you can see me." Nian blinked and nodded honestly, apparently not having heard what Lorna had said. "Oh, this." Susan's mind went blank. Then, with both hands grasping her pants, she quickly pulled them up, turned around to grab the rest of her clothes, and said with unprecedented shame, "Turn around." "I'll try." Nian twisted his left hand and turned around as well, almost back to back with Susan. The white man heard Nian's voice and asked concernedly, "Susan, was that boy invisible too?" "He could see you." "Yes, read. It must be my ability. The boy's hands were fused to my body, unable to separate. Then he became invisible too, but we can both see each other while invisible. This is so strange." "Wait a minute," Susan said, her white shirt halfway on. She turned around and looked at the black-haired boy. "Why? You're fully clothed, with your backpack on, and you're completely invisible." Susan was completely shocked. Once Susan had put on all her clothes and released her invisibility, she and Nian, who were connected to her, revealed their true forms. There really is someone else. Johnny, a white young man, looked at Nian in surprise. His gaze quickly fell on Nian's left hand, which had slipped under his sister's shirt, maintaining its grip on her slender waist. He shouted in frustration, "Hey, kid, it's about time you let go." Seeing this, Reed didn't know what to say, so he turned to Susan and said, "Now, can we use our powers to separate?" "I can't, I'm not proficient in this ability yet," Susan said distressedly. She also felt it. It wasn't Nian holding her intentionally, but rather a force within him, drawing their bodies together like a force field. Nian remained silent. Perhaps only Nian himself understood what was going on. The moment Nian and Susan came into contact earlier, there had been more than just contact, an exchange of media, the triggering of the master of the familiar. Nian had gained Susan's physical abilities. But perhaps even Susan herself wasn't proficient in this ability, leading to the current situation. Invisible mode? No, it should be conjoined invisible mode. Chapter 131, Conjoined Twins, Wanda learns the law. "Hey, you're the first person to fuck my sister right in front of me. What's your name, kid?" Johnny, unaware of Reed's slightly distorted expression, demanded angrily from Nian. "My name is Max Eisenhart." Nian chose not to use his real name, but casually said one. He glanced at Lorna beside him. "I'm his sister, Polaris." Lorna suddenly stepped forward, hugged Nian's arm, and said sweetly, "Sister." Johnny, Reed, and Susan were all stunned. No matter how you looked at it, they weren't related by blood. "She's indeed my sister. I was adopted by her family, so..." Nian improvised, filling in the gaps, his eyes dimming with emotion. He gave himself full marks for his acting. "So that's how it is," Johnny suddenly realized, then asked, "So you two are out here alone?" "It can't be helped. Polaris insisted on going to downtown Los Angeles for the weekend." Nian sighed helplessly and said to Susan, "Sister, can you let me go now?" This is the art of speaking. This made it seem as if Susan's body had grasped Nian's hand. Susan, believing her powers were out of control, apologized. I'll try my best," and looked to Reed for help. Reed consoled her, "Kids, I'll find a way to separate you. For now, just think of it as me taking you on a free tour of Los Angeles." "That's great," Nian said, his expression slightly moved. He and Lorna didn't want to reveal their identities or abilities. There was one more thing. Guan Luo had already explained to Nian through his mind. Not only the stone figure and the invisible Susan, but also the man Reed and the young man Johnny possessed extraordinary energies. Of these, Susan and Johnny, the siblings, possessed the strongest energies. Reed breathed a sigh of relief, though he also found it somewhat amusing that he had just been jealous of a child. His rival in love was, at most, Victor, a handsome, wealthy CEO of the same age. How could he possibly be an ordinary, underage boy? "Now that we've found Ben, let's go back to the office first," Johnny said, looking at the stone figure not far away. Reed was about to say something, but at that moment, on the bridge road across the way, a construction truck accelerated with a loud roar, suddenly losing control and flipping over, sending a shower of fiery sparks into the ground as it hurtled towards the accident scene. Screams erupted, and countless onlookers fled in panic. Lorna, holding Nian's arm, narrowed her eyes, turned her back to Susan and the others, and lowered one of her small hands, but before she could use her power, there was another boom. A tall orange figure rushed forward. The stone figure, with its rocky arms spread out, blocked the construction truck head-on like a humanoid rock. The truck's head continued to dent inward, pushing the stone figure several meters further, leaving two clearly visible plow marks before finally coming to a stop on the bridge road. The people at the scene erupted in cheers. "That's not bad," Nian thought to himself as he watched the scene unfold. While it wasn't anywhere near the level of the Abomination or the Hulk, its strength alone rivaled that of a super spider. Looking at this massive creature, strength might be secondary, its true strength lies in its defense. After all, its appearance had become such a monstrous spectacle. The disaster wasn't over yet, it felt like death arrives. From the trunk of the construction truck, which had been stopped by the thing, a metal bottle containing an unknown object fell. It rolled on the ground several times before suddenly exploding, and a blazing flame instantly spread towards the surrounding vehicles. "Follow me," Susan seemed to sense something and rushed forward. Nian, still clinging to her, could only follow, causing Lorna to chuckle. I can do it, I can do it," Susan muttered to herself. Suddenly, She stretched out her palms, and a wave of energy, like a physical shield, emerged, a translucent blue stream that enveloped the flames. Susan, intensely focused, didn't notice. At that moment, a faint blue hue of the same energy flashed in Nian's eyes. He vaguely sensed that he was now more than just physically connected to Susan. Their abilities and energies were also connected through their bodies. This was a strange phenomenon never before experienced. Was it due to Susan's unique abilities? Invisibility, and now, her shielding abilities? It was probably far more than that. And so, while even Susan was somewhat amazed, the energy shield effortlessly enveloped the flames, then quickly closed, extinguishing the flames within. "Well done!" Johnny shouted, pumping his fist. Lorna, standing beside him, silently lowered her hand. "Let's go back first. Don't stay out here anymore." Seeing more and more people paying attention, Reed spoke up, glancing at Nian and Lorna separately. "You two, come over here too." Nian and Lorna exchanged glances, each more obedient than the other, refusing to refuse. Now, they were just playing the role of a normal pair of siblings. Kamar Taj, Ancient Training Ground. As always, Master Mordo led the mages of the Holy Land in spell training day after day, year after year. But today, something was different. Ancient One, the Supreme Mage of the Holy Land, personally visited the training grounds. Not only that, she even brought a young girl from outside to observe. Was the Supreme Mage planning to accept another disciple? And this disciple wasn't one who had come to study on their own, but rather had been brought in directly from outside, as if by privilege. A somewhat conceited Mage Mordo felt a pang of displeasure as he explained to the mages below, "Although you already know this, I'll repeat it. The language of the esoteric arts has existed since the dawn of civilization. Ancient mages called it spells, the source code that constructs reality. We mages primarily draw the powerful energies we need from other worlds in the multiverse. Combining them with spells, we unleash extraordinary magic, like summoning shields and forging weapons. But this process isn't something you can just dream up. Even the most gifted require years of diligent study and practice. Now, let's practice the most basic spell preludes." Mage Mordo muttered a strange and obscure spell. With a sweep of his hands, a golden thread, sparking with sparks, materialized from thin air. The other mages began to replicate his movements, silently chanting the spell and simultaneously creating streaks of golden light. Next to the ancient training grounds, little Wanda stood quietly beside the Ancient One, her eyes wide open. She listened intently to the practice on the field, glancing sideways at the robed Ancient One, her lips opening and closing slightly as if about to speak. The Ancient One smiled at her, "Do whatever you wish." "Is that so?" Wanda took a deep breath, repeating the spell Mordo had just spoken in clear and melodious tones. She raised her small hand, and with a gentle wave of her fair, delicate right hand, a golden thread instantly ignited from the air. Chapter 132 Fantastic Four, Speedrun. Nian and Lorna followed Susan and her group back to their company. The building was located in a prime commercial district in Los Angeles. The entire 28th floor, near the top, was occupied by Reed's tech company. With his left hand gripping the waist of the invisible Susan, and his right arm cradled by the green-haired Lorna, Nian was practically carried along by the two. Johnny, who looked a lot like Captain America, winked at him and said, "Kid, you're so young, and you're already carrying people around. You're even more impressive than I was when I was younger." "Johnny, you'll scare people like that," Susan scolded. Reed remained speechless. The stone figure named Ben looked dejected and sad, as if he'd been heartbroken, his dry stone eyes nearly tearing up. However, when they boarded the elevator, it was overloaded, and he had to take the next one alone. This was even more depressing. Nian had discovered a law: such extraordinary giants were destined for bad luck. They always took the hardest beatings even with the thickest shields. The Hulk was fine, at least he could return to his normal form, but the stone man might remain like this for the rest of his life. Arriving at the deserted, vast, cluttered company floor, Nian took a quick look and saw all sorts of specialized scientific instruments inside. There were also numerous outer space charts and schedules hanging on the walls. It seemed they had recently traveled to space. Wait? Nian's eye twitched. Could it be the spacecraft he'd nearly crashed into during his previous battle with Superman in his super godly mode? No way, no way, it couldn't be such a coincidence. Nian glanced at Susan and the other three again, secretly speculating that perhaps something they'd encountered in outer space had caused their bodies to become extraordinary. Reed and the others didn't know what the young man was thinking, or else they'd have exclaimed in amazement. After all, this was so close to the truth. Let me check first. Reed led everyone back to the laboratory equipped with measuring equipment. He first took out a handheld laser scanner and scanned and measured the junction between Susan's waist and Nian's palm. Fearing that his body's secrets would be discovered, Nian calmed down and did not attempt to use his internal energy. In a sense, he now possessed Susan's physical abilities more stably than she did. After all, Nian had mastered both weaker and stronger physiques than Susan's current one, more than once or twice. Meanwhile, Susan had only just begun to understand some of her extraordinary abilities and had not yet fully tapped into them. Sometimes, pirated goods can be even better than the original. Looking at the values and images displayed on the measuring instrument screen, Reed frowned and judged, "Susan, you have a strange force field within you right now. This must be one of your current abilities. Because the force field is unstable, your body is pulling at Max's hand. Then how can we separate now?" Susan blushed slightly. She could constantly feel the boy's hot hand, grasping at her sensitive waist. Although her body instinctively wanted to separate from the hand, the force field within her body held them tightly. It was like being constantly kneaded and stroked by Nian's hand. "I don't recommend forcing the separation," Reed pondered. "Forcing the separation might stimulate the force field and cause harm to both of you. However, it's likely temporary. Once you relax, or at some point, the force field will automatically dissipate." "How long will it take?" Susan continued. Reed paused, then said helplessly, "Maybe 10 minutes, a few hours, or even a day or two. I'm sorry to bother you two. You'll have to stay here for a while, Max and Polaris," Susan sighed, looking apologetically at Nian and Lorna. "It's okay. I think this is a truly magical experience," Nian smiled. He really didn't care. He knew full well that they could separate at the latest after his master's visit was over. Half a day was all it would take. The stone man standing nearby, however, couldn't wait any longer. He stepped forward impatiently and said, "Reed, quickly give me a full physical exam to see if I can return to my original form." "No problem," Reed nodded. He needed a test subject, and Ben was the perfect candidate. Reed began preparing the equipment for human testing. While trying to grab an object a few meters away, he instinctively reached forward to grab it. His arm stretched out like rubber, then abruptly retracted after grabbing the object. "Rubberman? Are you Luffy?" Nian suppressed the urge to complain. "I don't really want to change back. This is pretty cool, isn't it?" Johnny muttered. He raised his right hand and snapped his fingers crisply. A ball of fire suddenly erupted from his fingers, blazing across his palm without burning the surface. Nian watched Johnny's body spontaneously ignite. This was somewhat similar to the invader he had encountered before, the same high temperature, the same fire, the essential difference being that Johnny used his internal energy to ignite the surface, as if he were deeply controlling and harnessing the flames, while the invader simply heated himself up, reaching a temperature high enough to ignite the surroundings. "Because you didn't become a ghost like me." Hearing Johnny's nonchalant words, the stone man, irritated, glared at him and shouted hoarsely, "Let's try switching appearances and see what your girlfriends think. I guarantee you'll cry. Anyway, I'm a fireman, not a stone ghost. Turning into a stone ghost is worse than letting me die." Johnny spread his hands, unafraid of the monstrous stone man. "All right, Johnny, keep quiet." Susan scolded him again, and Johnny finally shut up. "Yet, being afraid of your sister really is universally applicable." Nian sighed inwardly, looking at Lorna, who was acting like a well-behaved little sister, and suddenly remembered Wanda, the little maid at home. At this point, Wanda should have been taken by the Ancient One to study in the Holy Land. Magic, surely, must be difficult? Camartage. Looking at the Crimson Girl, who instantly drew lines of mana after hearing the spell once, everyone at the ancient training ground, including the Ancient One and the Mage Mordo, had a stunned expression, their understanding revisited. The first step for ordinary people into the mysteries of magic is often the most arduous. It requires not only natural talent, but also wisdom, hard work, and countless years of time before they can even reach the threshold of becoming a true mage apprentice. But Mordo had never seen anyone as fast-paced as today's. At that moment, a gentle breeze blew across the ancient training ground, as century-old vicissitudes of life, and the sun shone brightly. The golden magic lines flickered, sparks overflowed, and each spark was like a small world. Wanda's hands, which usually did housework at home, had white and slender fingers that easily touched the mystery of the multidimensional universe. Chapter 133. You two are born with aliens. Susan and the other three were completely unprepared for Nian and Lorna, the siblings. Firstly, they were so young, less than 30 years old combined, making it difficult to pin conspiracy theories on them. Secondly, the entire situation was being attributed to Susan's unilateral loss of control. Reed, with his superior intelligence, might have noticed Nian's abnormality, but he had experienced too many events that day, and was now completely preoccupied with his physical transformation. Furthermore, the anxiety of his good friend, the stone man Ben, had infected him, causing him to treat Nian and Lorna as ordinary children. Nian blended in, and with the help of the intelligence provided by the can in his backpack, Luo quickly figured out what was going on with this group of people who had just come into contact with the supernatural. A week ago, Reed's research had discovered that exposure to high-energy cosmic storms generated by the solar wind could trigger the evolution of early planetary life. Research into this could fundamentally advance our understanding of human genetics, leading to the development of new drugs to treat various human diseases. So, Reed and his friend Ben went to a company run by a CEO named Victor to solicit investment. Together with Susan, then the company's head of genetics, and her brother Johnny, the five of them boarded the company's dedicated spacecraft and headed into outer space. While in space, they were accidentally exposed to a cosmic storm. Since returning yesterday, the four of them have begun experiencing a series of abnormalities. First, Ben's body turned to stone, allowing him to easily lift a multi-ton car. Reed's body turned to rubber, allowing him to freely stretch and contract. Johnny gained the ability to control fire, enveloping himself in flames and even creating supernova-like flames reaching tens of thousands of degrees Celsius. Of the four, Susan's abilities are the most complex and diverse. Currently, they are known to allow for invisibility, energy shielding, and mysterious force field effects. Reed is truly a scientific genius. Although he couldn't immediately create a machine to counter cosmic storms, he developed special suits for the four of them, magical, flammable, invisible, and retractable suits that are indestructible. Nian figured the Hulk's boxer shorts should also be a similar suit. Reed and Johnny immediately changed into their magical suits. Susan, still connected to Nian's left hand, couldn't change even if she wanted to. After a quick check on their physical condition and the suit's development, night had already fallen outside the office windows. By the way, I need to go find Victor. Reed looked out at the illuminated city outside, as if remembering something very important, and hurriedly left the office. Has this just dawned on me? Nian muttered to himself. Since the four of them had transcended their bodies and gained miraculous abilities, Victor, the investor who had accompanied them, should have also developed some unusual health issues. Meanwhile, Susan, clutching her magical suit in one hand, smiled at Nian. Max, then come with me, back to my house, okay? Okay, Nian smiled back. Be careful, kid. Don't try to mess with my sister tonight, Johnny Cully warned from the side. Susan glared at him, finally losing her temper and scolding him. Johnny, what are you talking about? He's still a student, several years younger than me. Besides, Polaris will be coming too. Who knows? Johnny shrugged. He was actually quite happy to see Reed become his brother-in-law. It was better than the arrogant, unpleasant Victor. But as a seasoned lover with over 10 girlfriends under his belt, Johnny had a sense of foreboding ever since he saw Nian. He watched his sister Susan, Nian, and Lorna leave the company. Johnny shook his head, dismissing his ridiculous thoughts. It couldn't be that a boy even younger than him would end up being his brother-in-law, could it? Susan's home was actually in downtown Los Angeles, an apartment on the same street as the company. The apartment, less than 50 square meters, was perfectly suitable for a single person, but with Nian and Lorna arriving, it felt a bit cramped. A soft light flickered on. Susan, with her tousled blonde hair tied up, looked capable and intelligent. As hostess, she quickly helped Nian tidy up the scattered clothes and books on the sofa. After several hours of being together, the two had developed a certain tacit understanding. When one lifted a foot, the other would follow suit. However, it was as if Nian had been clinging to Susan's waist. The combination of the immature boy and the mature woman had drawn a few strange glances from the taxi driver. Fortunately, Susan had developed a sense of modesty from her lunchtime outdoor experience. Considering the inconvenience of eating dinner out, Susan grabbed a McDonald's family bucket of hamburgers and took Nian to the small dining table in the living room. She called to Lorna, who had been following her obediently. "Can we have hamburgers for dinner?" North Star. "Yes, sister," Lorna replied sweetly, her voice soft and adorable. Nian couldn't help but glance at her hair. It was dark green, not crimson. Just now, he had thought the girl sitting next to him had been replaced by Wanda. So good. Seeing Lorna graciously sitting in the chair, Susan's heart softened, and she reached out to touch Lorna's head. "Don't." Seeing a cold glint in Lorna's eyes, Nian quickly stood up to stop Susan's action, gently slapping her hand away with his right hand. But the moment his hand touched Susan's, Nian regretted it. A burst of static electricity tingled at the point of contact, triggering a second force field, and Nian's right palm and the back of Susan's hand joined together. "Susan." "Nian." Lorna blinked, her lips curled up slightly like a little devil, as if watching a show. Nian looked at the second joint and slowly uttered the words he hadn't finished. "My sister doesn't like people touching her head." The scene before him was destined to make men speechless and women cry. Nian's left hand grasped Susan's right waist, connecting with her, and his right hand connected with the back of Susan's left hand. The two of them were like a dancing couple at a ball, frozen by the spotlight shining on them, and remained motionless in their intimate posture. Nian sighed as he looked at the hamburger on the table, his stomach growling slightly. His hands were now completely useless. "Let me help you take off the mask and feed you." Susan took a deep breath, feeling that as the only adult here, she should take responsibility. "No matter what the situation, don't panic." "No, let Polaris come." Nian shouted hurriedly. He was really scared. If Susan's remaining right hand was connected to his face, the two of them would really be conjoined into an alien shape. Chapter 134, A Lifelong Regret at First Sight. From the moment he met the Fantastic Four until his return to the home of Invisible Girl Susan, Nian had taken off his cap, but he wore a black mask throughout, never revealing his features. Even his name and identity were fabricated. From the outset, Nian had believed his encounter with the Fantastic Four was merely a coincidence. Furthermore, he and Lorna had a secret mission to deal with the invading forces, so he didn't want to reveal his true face or identity. Now, Susan was the only outsider left, and given their current state, separation was impossible anytime soon. Nian nodded to Lorna, who immediately jumped off her chair and came to Nian's side, removing the ear clips from his mask. Under the soft, dim light, Susan, who was conjoined to Nian, gradually opened her beautiful eyes, their gleaming eyes resuming their brilliance. The lower half of her face, previously hidden by the mask, was revealed. This was the first time she saw the boy's full face. His features were delicate and handsome, a clean and sunny expression, with a hint of youthful innocence. "I wonder how much younger than me he is." Susan's heart suddenly leaped. Up close, face to face, Susan gazed at the boy's bright, handsome face. Their bodies clung to each other, the warmth radiating from their waists and hands, the sweat that made their bodies slippery, the hot breath they exhaled as they faced each other. Things she had previously considered indifferent now weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't ignore them. "What's wrong? Is there something dirty on my face?" Nian asked curiously, sensing Susan's gaze. No. Let's eat dinner. Don't starve." Avoiding Nian's gaze, Susan's girlish cheeks flushed, though fortunately, the dim light didn't show it. Lorna's eyes, inexplicably filled with hostility, flickered in Susan's direction. Then, she glared secretly at Nian. This jerk, like a walking Joel, was attracting the opposite sex again. The competition was growing. "Brother, I'll feed you," Lorna suddenly said sweetly, gently supporting Nian's chin with one hand while she took the large burger and stuffed it into his mouth. Woo-woo. Nian's mouth was full, and he had somehow offended the North Star boss again. "North Star. This much? Your brother can't finish it all in one bite," Susan said, looking at Nian, who was barely holding the burger in his mouth close to her. Instinctively, she leaned forward, opened her lipstick-coated mouth, and took a bite of the burger. "Huh?" Invisible Woman Susan covered her lips with her hand. She chewed gently a few times and swallowed. Seeing the burger clearly missing from Nian's mouth, she realized how inappropriate her previous behavior was. "I want some too." Lorna, thinking Susan was provoking her, immediately stood on tiptoe, pretending to bite off the burger in Nian's mouth. Nian quickly took a bite, swallowing the burger, and his forehead gently touched Lorna's smooth forehead. "Don't you have some yourself? Eat yours quickly." Nian's words were unclear as he chewed. HMPH. Lorna returned to her seat with a little dissatisfaction. Nian looked at Susan, who pretended to have forgotten the bite she had just taken, and Lorna, who was suppressing her emotions with a sullen look, and felt that tonight would not be so easy to get through. When Nian and the other two were enjoying their dinner in the room, the TV started broadcasting the news about the serial car accident on the bridge at noon today, and the Fantastic Four who displayed extraordinary abilities. Los Angeles will probably have its own exclusive hero in the future, let us wait and see. The female reporter concluded excitedly. Regarding this, Nian was secretly lucky that he and Lorna only flashed in front of the media cameras, and were just passers-by. After the car accident on the bridge finished, the TV jumped to the next news item. Yesterday afternoon, Tony Stark's Los Angeles beachfront villa, which he revealed to the media, was bombed by 3 terrorist helicopters. The luxurious villa and the entire mountain were bombed into the sea. Tony Stark, who was inside the villa at the time, is unknown, but his secretary, Pepper Potts, survived. The TV screen showed a cliffside scene battered by artillery fire. Since last night, the local military has completely cordoned off the area and sent a large number of divers to search for Tony Stark. So far, Tony Stark has not been found. The U.S. cabinet stated that War Machine has tracked down the terrorists. After watching the news on TV, Nian and Lorna exchanged a silent glance. They hadn't expected the newspaper they'd read last night to be so up-to-date. Iron Man's luxurious Los Angeles villa had been bombed by terrorists the same day he provoked them. This showed how brazen these terrorists truly were. Nian knew full well that these were no ordinary terrorists. Their true identity was definitely not the so-called Jews, but rather a biological doctor named Killian. Moreover, they possessed extraordinary abilities, those who could release high temperatures and rapidly heal themselves. If it weren't for the accident with Susan, Nian and Lorna would have already wiped out the terrorists. Now, they could only wait until they were separated from Susan. Let's give War Machine a chance to shine. Maybe he can successfully eliminate the terrorist group, Nian thought. In a mansion on the outskirts of Los Angeles. "Even if you take my men hostage, you can't get my armor," War Machine, mounted on the machine, said firmly, as several terrorists gathered and watched. In War Machine's cockpit, the Black Colonel Rhodes wore a determined expression. He wore silver steel armor based on the old Mark armor, unpainted and crudely modified for military use. He had painstakingly obtained this armor from Tony Stark, and valued it more than his own wife. "You'll get out on your own." Killian, the blond man in a suit and the terrorist leader, didn't take it seriously. He walked right up to War Machine and placed his right palm against the steel armor's underbelly. As his palm burned like molten lava, the armor began to sizzle, and the heat began to penetrate the metal. Colonel Rhodes, who was inside the armor, was forced to disarm and escape from the cockpit. He still wanted to fight back with his bare hands, but unfortunately, ideals are full of plumpness and reality is very skinny. Killian kicked him to the ground. War Machine, completely defeated. Chapter 135. Who is my aunt? Inside, Nian and Susan prepared for bed, but how to sleep was a major problem. After all, their bodies were connected by a force field in 2 places. They tried several positions, but ultimately, they settled on lying on their sides, facing each other, which was the optimal solution for now. So, after lights out, Susan slept on the left side of the bed, Nian in the middle, and Lorna behind him. He was sandwiched between the mature woman, one large and one small, and the young woman, like a hamburger. It looked like a beautiful scene, but in reality, Nian's hands gripped Susan's body, unable to move at all, causing his wrists to ache. Nian had barely slept the previous night, having spent the night caring for Lorna. Today, having traveled from New York to Los Angeles, he was already exhausted. Shortly after laying down on the bed, he fell into a deep, drowsy sleep. After Nian quickly fell asleep, the 2 men lying on either side also seemed to fall asleep, their eyes closed, their breathing even, filling the dark room with a sudden silence. An unknown amount of time passed. Susan slowly opened her beautiful turquoise eyes, and the first thing she saw was, naturally, the face of a young man sleeping soundly under the night sky. She was actually quite sleepy, but despite trying, she couldn't fall asleep. Not only was her waist and the back of her hand firmly grasped by the boy, but since they were lying side by side, facing each other, she could constantly feel his warm breath on her face, making her already hot face and body even more restless. The sweat that flowed made the surface of their bodies connected slippery and damp. Her well-trained body felt like it was being held tightly by two large hands. And he was still a high school student, and they had only known each other for less than half a day. How could she sleep? Susan already regretted what she had said that afternoon. He was indeed a student, but he was also a man on the verge of adulthood. Especially after seeing his face, Susan suddenly realized that she couldn't regard him as just an ordinary boy, or even a younger brother. When Susan was in college, a popular social game on campus involved staring at a classmate of the opposite sex for 10 seconds to see if they felt a surge of affection. Even today, Susan, a mature and intelligent person, still considers it a childish game. Choosing a partner should be about character and substance, not just appearance. But now, Susan's heart began to waver. From then on, she couldn't hold Nian's gaze. Even for a second, let alone 10 seconds, she worried whether she'd truly fall in love. And what worried Susan even more was that if Nian knew she harbored such fantasies, it would be even more shameful than streaking. No, I must be mistaken. Susan tried to convince herself, but at that moment, the sleeping black-haired boy reached out and pulled her into his arms. Susan's chaotic mind suddenly went blank. She was almost the same height as the boy, pressed against their clothes, and a hot breath slid down her exposed neck. Susan, like an oversized adult doll, was embraced by Nian, feeling the softness and comfort. Suddenly, Susan heard Nian mumble, "Auntie. Auntie, who is that?" Susan froze. She was more concerned with the person Nian had mentioned in his dream than the fact that her body was being occupied and encased. Elsewhere, behind Nian, the green-haired girl, who had seemed long asleep in bed, suddenly opened her eyes, then quickly closed them again. Late at night, the phone on the bedside table suddenly rang loudly, piercing the silence and darkness of the room. Susan, who had fallen asleep in Nian's arms, woke with a start. Instinctively, she pulled away from the boy's embrace, got out of bed, and picked up the ringing phone on the table to answer it. The bedside lamp flickered on, its dim light slightly dispelling the darkness. "Johnny, what did you say?" "Victor." Susan's sleepiness quickly faded as she listened to the voice on the phone. She replied solemnly, "Okay, I'll be right there." "What happened?" Nian asked, rubbing his sleepy eyes and yawning as he stood up. "Nothing, just some business at the company that I need to take care of." Susan's tone was flustered and worried, clearly not the ordinary business she'd been discussing. Susan looked at Nian lying on the bed, then down at herself, and belatedly said with surprise, "Oh, we're separated." "Really?" Nian glanced down at his hands. It wasn't even time for the master of the familiar trend yet, so he asked in confusion, "How did you do that?" "Maybe. I fell asleep and unknowingly released a force field," Susan stammered, feeling lucky Nian hadn't noticed she'd fallen asleep in his arms. Falling asleep in the arms of a high school student 10 years her junior was truly embarrassing. "I'm going out first. You guys continue to rest," Susan said, picking up the magical suit from the chair next to her and hurried out of the room. Nian narrowed his eyes, sitting on the bed, and heard the door slam outside the apartment. Something had happened, perhaps the fifth person who had also been caught in the cosmic storm. "Boss, are you still asleep?" Nian looked at the green-haired girl lying beside him. "Let's go out and take a look. This is a good time to explore Killian's company." Lorna lay curled up in the bed like a stray kitten, her small body slightly curled up, without any response. "Boss Polaris." Nian reached forward, but before he could touch the girl's body, a cool green fluorescent light shone through the dim room. A force pulled him backward onto the bed. Before Nian could react, he saw a vibrant green swaying before his eyes, and then a small, light body leaped up and powerfully straddled his lower abdomen. "Boss Polaris, what are you doing?" Before Nian could finish his words, a soft little mouth blocked his mouth. Compared with the previous strong and proactive, this time, it was undoubtedly tougher, rougher and more desperate. Under the green fluorescent glow, the short green hair was flying wildly, and Xinian's chest was supported by a pair of small hands. His body and mind were suppressed. Unable to breathe, Xinian was a little confused. Looking at Luna's delicate little face in front of him, he felt for the first time that he was the one who absorbed the medium. There was no smell of smoke, but there was a hint of sweetness. That was the lip bitten by the pearly teeth, but this time it was not caused by the unskillfulness like the first time, but the girl was too domineering and strong and did it intentionally. It had been a long time since I was kissed. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136 You Only Need Me in Your Eyes. After a long moment, the sound of water ceased. A green glow lingered in the illuminated room. The green-haired girl tilted her head upward, proudly revealing her delicate white chin. She licked her moist, glistening lips and gazed down at Nian beneath her. Because I've been weak and sick these past couple of days, you haven't really been treating me like a younger sister in need of protection, have you, brother? That's not the case, Nian swallowed with a gurgling sound. Luna's lips curled upwards, possessive as she declared, I just want to tell you that you'll always be my little brother. Don't even think about becoming the boss. I don't care about other times. As long as I'm here, you can only see me. With that, Luna lowered her lips once more. Nian was no longer able to think. He still possessed the powers of the invisible girl Susan, invisibility, protective energy, and force field. At this moment, he once again triggered the master of the familiar, gaining Luna's extraordinary ability, magnetic control. Each of these two abilities, taken individually, possesses an extremely high upper limit of strength, making it difficult to integrate them with other supernatural abilities. Aside from the versatile physical ability of the super spider, combining them with other abilities would easily lead to imbalance and loss of control. However, Susan's and Lorna's abilities both focus on control, even possessing a transcendental ability to influence the field. Their compatibility is surprisingly well matched. Thus, at this moment, these two supernatural control abilities, primarily focused on non-physical aspects, experienced an unprecedented convergence, fusion, and sublimation within Nian's body. A green fluorescence suddenly emanated from Nian, merging with the fluorescence from Lorna, who sat on his lower abdomen. Then, as Nian's eyes shone with a faint blue energy, it was as if a solar storm had flowed down from outer space, transforming his green fluorescence into higher energy form. From fluorescent green to deep blue, Nian's eyes, and even his hair, began to rapidly glow blue from the strange fusion of energy. Crash! Nian's mere presence disrupted the physical laws of the entire apartment, causing every object within to levitate. Gravity defied, as if the apartment were nestled in outer space. While Nian could only control protective energy and force fields with Susan's powers alone, and could only manipulate metal objects with magnetism with Lorna's powers alone, he now controlled every tangible object around him, effortlessly creating and manipulating energy, truly subverting force fields, a true breaker of the laws of physics. With his body shielded by a blue energy shield and flowing blue short hair, Nian levitated from the bed. He embraced the green-haired girl, pulling her into his arms while sipping the syrupy medium. Little brother, you've been enhanced. Let's get out of here, Lorna said, commandingly, patting Nian's shoulder and pouting, without giving him a chance to assert himself as boss. Okay, boss. Nian smiled faintly. He embraced the lithe green-haired girl in a princess hug and floated out of the room. His blue eyes glanced at the backpack on the sofa, and the bag suddenly flew towards him, landing in the green-haired girl's arms in front of him. Meow. Inside the backpack, the little emperor, lying on a glass jar, opened his eyes. We should get out of here. Nian flew low over the living room, carrying Luna. The balcony window automatically opened, allowing the two to fly directly out of the apartment. At the same time, the table lamp in the room turned off. Outside, on the street. What was that just now? The man walking his dog at night looked as if he had seen a ghost. He thought he had seen a man and a woman in the air, flying out of the balcony window of the neighboring apartment, but in a flash, they disappeared completely, as if they had become invisible. In the bustling downtown area of Los Angeles, dazzling LED lights shone everywhere, and skyscrapers towered into the night sky. Even in the early morning, the streets and alleys were still bustling with people. At this very moment, In the most valuable section of this city that never sleeps, an extraordinary battle was unfolding. Swoosh! Amidst the gasps and horrified gazes of countless onlookers, a missile was chasing a humanoid flame. From the blazing flames, one could barely make out a handsome young man with a buzz cut who looked a bit like Captain America. Fuck. That bastard Victor, he's really killing me. I thought he had a chance of becoming my brother-in-law. Johnny cursed as he flew at high speed, transformed into a fireman. He turned several corners, unable to escape the infrared tracking missile, and finally flew towards the city's seascape on a nearby pedestrian street. Soon, a burning transport ship exploded, and the humanoid flame was extinguished in the Black Sea. Elsewhere, at the side of the missile launch, the top-floor windows of a commercial building burst open, and two strange, entangled bodies plummeted, crashing directly into a transport truck 100 meters below. Rumble. With a flash of lightning from the back of the transport truck, the stone man and the rear hatch were blown away, crashing heavily into another vehicle 20 or 30 meters away. Trampling. A black figure emerged from the back of the transport truck. His tall, slender figure was draped in a black cloak and hood, his body and face encased in a steel shell. His body emanated terrifying plasma and lightning, as if embodying a fusion of ultra-black technology and extraordinary powers. He was the fifth person besides the Fantastic Four to be struck by the cosmic storm, and the president of the technology company that had invested in the previous space research mission, Victor Von Doom. Horizontal ellipsis. Victor's eyes, filled with hatred and indifference, were revealed behind a cold, gleaming metal mask. As his hands, also clad in silver metal gloves, rose, bolts of lightning erupted, rapidly destroying streetlights, cars, trees, and more, sending passers-by in the nearby city fleeing in panic. He was like the embodiment of destruction. Clearly, the extraordinary power he had gained was far more powerful than any of the Fantastic Four. Victor coldly gazed at the stone figure dozens of meters away. He raised his right hand, and a bolt of lightning, as thick as his wrist, blasted straight at him. A slender figure in a magical battle suit stood in front of the stone figure. Susan, who had arrived at the scene just in time, raised her left arm, shielding herself with protective energy like a shield, blocking the devastating lightning within. The strong wind blew her golden hair back, and Susan gritted her teeth, holding on for dear life. In less than 2 seconds, she felt she could no longer hold on. A cold glint flashed in Victor's eyes, and he raised his other hand, sending another blinding bolt of lightning crashing down. "Get out of the way, Susan!" the stone figure behind him shouted. Knowing she couldn't withstand the blow, Susan tried to dodge, but her beautiful blue eyes quickly widened in shock. But then, the energy shield in front of her expanded and multiplied at a visible speed. A massive energy flow rapidly formed a blue protective shield, as if condensing into a truly physical defensive shield. It was over 3 times larger than the shield Susan had previously constructed, layered one on top of the other to form a 3-layered energy structure, completely shielding her tall, intelligent form. Zzz! 2 bolts of lightning and plasma intertwined and slammed into the shield, unable to shake it in the slightest. Even a single flash of lightning emanating from it was enough to shatter the floor. A new female supporting character, Susan, has been added to the character list. Please like her. The most popular supporting character will receive special treatment in the future. Also, please leave comments, even just a quick check-in. If I don't see your comments, I'll be seriously stuck. Greek letter epsilon equals Greek letter omicron. Chapter 137 Superbodies Nian, invisible. Since 5 days ago, Victor had been having recurring nightmares. In his dreams, he was still in the vastness of outer space, aboard a spaceship his company had developed, built to withstand cosmic storms. He, Reed, Susan, and the others were conducting scientific research in the capsule. It was the eve of the impending cosmic storm, and the 5 of them were preparing as usual. It was then that something unexpected happened. Of course, it wasn't the premature arrival of the cosmic storm, but something far more terrifying than the storm itself. Inside the spaceship's cabin, through the windows, the 5 of them first noticed a distant satellite mysteriously explode. A ball of orange flames blazed blindingly in the inky blackness of space. Then, a tiny figure burst forth from the flames at high speed, leaving behind a trail of flames streaked with metal fragments, hurtling towards their spaceship like a cannonball. In the blink of an eye, before everyone's astonished gaze, the figure had already approached the spaceship, and they could clearly see a tall, shirtless man. It was the resurrected Superman. At that moment, Victor's mind registered the presence, and he watched it plummet with undiminished speed. In that moment, with no time to react, and any reaction being futile, his body and soul tasted the bittersweet taste of despair and death. And in the next instant, another figure, as bright as daylight, like a bolt of lightning piercing the universe, caught up with him at a speed faster than Superman, and with a breathtaking kick, sent the other's body careening towards the moon, further to the side. A sacred, luminous golden aura trailed behind him, and silver hair, radiating a destructive light, flowed down his shoulders. He wore a black suit with a dark cape, and his golden proportioned body highlighted his perfectly muscular curves. Lightning bolts swirled around him, radiating the power of thunder and lightning. The young man, like an invincible god, towered above the universe. Even pausing for a fraction of a second beside the spaceship, left an indelible mark on Victor and the other three, nearly shattering their faith and understanding of science. Where does science end? Theology. Victor would never forget that powerful being, countless times more powerful than he could comprehend. It made his conceited self feel as weak and powerless as the rest of humanity. From that day on, Victor would awaken from nightmares, yearning for power beyond human reach. After being exposed to the cosmic storm and successfully returning to Earth yesterday, Victor finally awakened to transcendental power beyond human limits. However, the price he paid was the complete disfigurement of his face, forcing him to wear a steel mask before daring to face the world. He had initially thought he was the only lucky winner, but only after Reed came to him did he learn that the other four had also gained different transcendental abilities. And Reed hadn't even been disfigured. Jealousy, arrogance, hatred, and destructive emotions brewed within Victor, and he wanted to kill the other four who had also gained transcendental powers, leaving himself as the sole transcendental superhero to rule the city. In downtown Los Angeles, blue and white lightning flashed, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning. What the hell is going on? How can you possibly possess such powerful energy? Victor watched as two powerful lightning plasma attacks he had unleashed were blocked by an even more powerful energy shield. His exposed eyes widened, staring at Susan, who was shielded by 3 layers of shields, with a look of disbelief. Invisible Woman Susan's beautiful eyes were also a bit bewildered. Even she herself didn't understand what was happening, but the energy forming the shields was so familiar, as if it came from her own body. This is... Susan glanced upwards, as if aware of something. 10 meters above the street, a blue-haired boy, his body coated in a protective energy barrier, drifted down from the night sky. In his arms, he held a petite, green-haired girl. The childish and adorable girl, her arms folded across her chest, clutching a school bag. Her feet, delicate ankles visible beneath the cuffs of her trousers, swung back and forth non-stop like a swing. Those were Max and Polaris. How could this be possible? Susan's voluptuous lips parted slightly, revealing an expression even more astonished than Victor's. What are you looking at, Susan? Victor, noticing Susan's unusual behavior, raised his gaze and asked hoarsely. Can't he see? Susan glanced around, realizing that neither the stone figure behind her nor the bystanders had noticed the night sky above her. Suddenly, a sudden realization struck her. It wasn't just Victor who couldn't see. No one else, save herself, could see the siblings. They were in a state of constant invisibility. Even Susan admitted she couldn't achieve this. Currently, she could only turn invisible, requiring her to remove even her clothes to achieve full invisibility. Even attacking would reveal her invisibility. Simultaneously mastering the fusion of 2 superpowers, Nian, carrying Lorna, floated lightly down in front of Susan. His feet hovered about a meter above the ground, his gaze fixed on Victor, dressed in a blend of fantasy and technological styles. Who's there? Victor stared intently at the street ahead. Although he couldn't see the invisible Nian and Luna, even at this close distance, he could still faintly sense the presence of a creature ahead. Nian didn't respond, and Luna seemed to disdain a response. Come out. Victor suddenly raised his hands frantically, and bolts of lightning as thick as bowls erupted. The astonishing currents intertwined into a web, surging forward and escaping his body 10 meters away, only to be blocked by a blue energy shield that appeared from thin air. Found you. Victor sneered. He was about to unleash more lightning energy, but was quickly stunned. He couldn't move. Victor's eyes darted wildly, his hands raised, motionless. His body felt like it was sunk into impenetrable concrete, or embedded directly into a block of steel. 10 meters in front of him, low in the sky. Despite remaining invisible, Nian's arms were still actively engaged, holding Lorna. His eyes, however, glowed with a mysterious deep blue. Forgetting the inherent magnetic control possessed by Polaris Lorna, a formidable opponent for Victor, now clad in a metal armored mask, Nian had now combined Susan's abilities, elevating this extraordinary control to yet another level. To describe it as controlling everything was no exaggeration. Go down, Nian thought, and the blue arcs of light in his eyes and on his body shone brightly. Of course, this light was also due to his invisible superpower. Only Susan, who also possessed the ability to become invisible, could see everything. Chapter 138 Invincible Combination, Falling Straight into Hell. Go down, go down, go down. The words echoed through Victor's mind, echoing like a thought, echoing through his mind. Go down? Where? Just as this question crossed Victor's mind, he quickly grasped the underlying meaning, puff. Under the control of an invisible yet powerful energy field, Victor felt as if a giant hand were gripping his body, hammering it down relentlessly into the ground beneath him. Regardless of whether his body could withstand it or not, the paving tiles beneath him cracked and shattered first, and then the ground itself seemed to be pierced and broken by his own body. Bang! 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 Engulfed in the extraordinary force field, Victor's body took off with immense acceleration, pressing down upon the earth beneath him, breaking through the tiles, the concrete, the underground pipes, layer by layer, and then continuing downwards to break through the undeveloped stone and soil. Lorna extended a small hand with interest. Amidst a lingering green glow, the metal on Victor's body tugged at him, accelerating him. At this moment, Victor, who had appeared as a figure of destruction just moments before, transformed into a humanoid iron stake, sinking continuously towards the world beneath the city. Down, down, down. The rubble beneath his feet was constantly being dug up and broken, and Victor continued to sink deeper into the earth. In this moment, he once again experienced a taste of despair and death, but compared to before, this time, Victor couldn't even tell who his enemy was, or what their true appearance was. Who are you? No. Watching the neon lights of the city receding above him, Victor let out a heartbreaking cry, sinking further and further into the earth, over 100 meters below the surface. 200 meters, 500 meters, 1,000 meters, as if you were falling into the legendary hell. Until the depth was so great that even Victor's voice could hardly be heard from within. Lorna mumbled in boredom and retracted her hands. This game of whack-a-mole had ended far too quickly. It wasn't Victor's fault for being weak. It was simply that the current combination of Nian and Lorna was too unstoppable, their dual magnetic control seeming overpowering. Nian's eyes flashed blue, and the bottomless hole in the ground suddenly closed inward, the rock and soil returning to their original state. It seemed Nian had been holding Lorna throughout the entire process, but in reality, he was still performing at the peak of his current super-physical state. After all, super-physical state didn't improve physical fitness in any way, it only strengthened his control over energy and force fields. Therefore, whether Nian used his hands or feet or not had no effect on his abilities. But this scene, for Susan, the sole observer, was as shocking as the miracle she had witnessed aboard the spaceship. In her memory, the image of that invincible young god overlapped seamlessly with the silhouette of the blue-haired youth. Let's go. Without looking back, the enlarged Nian, clutching Lorna, soared into the night sky above the city. He offered his assistance simply because he was passing through, considering it a reward for borrowing Susan's abilities. Wait? Susan instinctively tried to call out to him. But Nian and Lorna seemed oblivious to her words. With a shimmering blue light, they vanished into the night sky, rising above the city's skyscrapers. We're leaving. Thanks for the burgers. See you again. The boy's final words were faintly audible. Invisible woman Susan stared blankly at the night sky until two figures in magical suits arrived, Reed, newly thawed, and Johnny, drying off the seawater. What happened here? Where's that bastard Victor? Johnny asked angrily and bewilderedly, scanning for Victor. Don't look for him. He's down there. The stone figure pointed to the ground beneath Johnny. Since he couldn't see the invisible Nian and Lorna, he was completely bewildered, thinking that Susan had just displayed her true power, knocking Victor down and burying him in the earth. Down there, what do you mean? Johnny instinctively lowered his head, only to see a circular dent in the ground beneath his feet. Susan, are you okay? Reed looked at Susan, who tilted her head slightly, and then glanced at the night sky. Is there anything over there? Nothing. Susan said, her expression dazed for a moment. She shook her head, looking at the remaining dent. Whether Victor is alive or not, he can't hurt anyone again. Everything is over, Susan whispered softly, the light in her beautiful eyes dimming, becoming dull and lifeless. Reed suddenly felt that the end Susan spoke of meant more than just Victor. He also felt that, in this moment, he had lost something forever, but what that something was still unknown. In Los Angeles, at the biotechnology company where Killian worked, the tightly closed windows of the top-floor office suddenly flew open. A chilly night breeze blew outside, rippling the documents and books on the dark desk and blowing the curtains aside. His body glowed with a strange, supernatural blue light, yet he was invisible. Taking advantage of his continuously enhanced abilities, the supersized Nian flew in through the office window, carrying Lorna. Their trip to Los Angeles was originally intended to target Killian, the mastermind behind Lorna's attack, but they hadn't anticipated the incident involving Invisible Woman Susan and her crew. Despite the significant loss of time, they had also gained a fusion of supernatural powers that could easily crush the enemy organization. So, Nian and Lorna got straight to the point of their trip. However, it was already past midnight. The office, and indeed the entire company building, was hushed. How are we going to find him? We're not going to have to wait here until dawn, Lorna muttered. Nian was about to say something when he suddenly said, someone's coming. In his current superhuman form, Nian could perfectly sense his surroundings without Guan Luo's reminder by releasing energy and deploying a transcendent force field. Combined with his ability to control surrounding objects, he seemed to possess a private domain of his own. About 10 seconds after Nian's foreboding words, the office door suddenly opened. A burly white man in a suit and tie walked in. He turned on the office lights, glanced at the open window in confusion, and muttered to himself, somewhat puzzled, strange. I clearly remember all the windows being locked from the inside. Nian looked up at the security camera in the corner of the office. It seemed the person was one of the security guards who had stayed behind at the company, likely having noticed something unusual in the camera footage and rushed to the office to investigate. A mental thought suddenly echoed in his mind. Nian, he's also experiencing unstable, scorching energy fluctuations within him, exactly like the guy last time. It was Guan Luo. In fact, Nian, with his exceptional energy sensitivity, had sensed it even without Guan Luo's reminder. This was truly lucky. Nian's lips curled up. He held Lorna, remaining invisible. The white man, completely blind to them, passed by them and reached the window, closing the doors and windows that led in the night breeze. The moment the doors and windows closed, the bright daylight in the office suddenly went out. The white man's entire body floated up and was thrown against the wall like a rag, with more than half of his body directly embedded in the wall. Superpowered Nian took action. Chapter 139, Polaris Lorna's Reward. It was the wee hours of the morning. Inside the main building of the Locks Enterprises, in a top-floor office, a strange and terrifying scene unfolded. A burly white man's bulk was pinned to a wall. He stared wide-eyed in terror, unable to see any enemy within the room after the lights went out. Even with the lights on, he couldn't see Nian and Luna standing before him, but the darkness undoubtedly evoked a surge of oppression and panic. What is going on? The white man, trapped in the wall, struggled desperately, exerting enough force to grind the wall around him, but he couldn't free himself, as if an invisible force were holding him together. A sizzle. The white man's panic grew, his body instinctively turning red and hot. As he continued to twist and struggle, the wall beside him melted into molten lava, dripping down the wall onto the floor. The white man suddenly stopped all movement. He was absolutely certain it wasn't the wall holding him back. After all, the wall beside him had melted away, yet his body remained frozen in place, frozen in the air. It was a scene reminiscent of a horror scene from a horror movie. The white man's body was being held captive by a mysterious, unknown, terrifying, and powerful force. A few meters away, inside the room, Nian's eyes shone with a shimmering blue light, as if concealing the truth of the laws, as if glimpsing a fraction of the universe's mysteries. His hands, still holding Lorna, moved in a different way. The prelude and the atmosphere are almost there, the superpowered Nian muttered silently, looking at the white man, fixed in the air, his body flushed with heat, his face etched with fear. Where's Killian? Nian's cold question echoed directly into the white man's ear, and at the same time, Thin blue threads from his body reached forward and penetrated his forehead. "Who are you?" The burly white man's body suddenly shuddered. His eyes scanned the office in horror, his thighs subconsciously clenching. His mind nearly collapsed at this moment, his voice trembling. "His enemies have come to seek revenge on him," Nian continued, his face tinged with the mischievous amusement of a mischievous child. Besides magnetic control, Lorna actually possessed another special ability, emotional regulation. This was a special mental ability that allowed Lorna to regulate her emotions and maintain a stable state of mind, preventing her from falling into darkness or extremism. Because this ability wasn't often manifested, it was more of a hidden ability. Now, Nian, who also possessed this ability, could use it to disrupt the enemy's mind, placing them in a highly unstable state. Although the burly white man was a life-or-death warrior, facing an unseen unknown presence and a pressure from a higher dimension, his mental stability had long since destabilized. Now, stimulated by Nian's emotions, a look of horror, as if he had seen a ghost, suddenly appeared on his face. His mental defenses completely crumbled at that moment. I'm telling you. Killian, he's in Los Angeles right now, at a private marina owned by Lux Enterprises. The address is..." Without missing a beat, the burly white man shuddered and revealed everything he knew. "Very good." As the invisible boy's final words rang out, the window of a nearby office suddenly flew open, letting the cold night wind from outside whistle in once more. With a thud, losing the control and support of his supernatural power, the white man's body plummeted to the floor. He quickly glanced around at the empty office space, which was empty except for himself. Had that mysterious and terrifying being left? "I'm still alive," the white man muttered joyfully, but suddenly realized that hot smoke was still rising from his body. It was the extremis virus within his body, spreading out of control. Like a pressure cooker heated to a certain temperature, it would explode. "No!" A desperate scream echoed from the office in the building, and then a powerful explosion erupted within, the shockwave carrying high temperatures melting all the glass on the floor. Horizontal ellipsis. Above the city that never sleeps, under the brilliant starry sky. Hundreds of meters above the city of Los Angeles, the clear and hearty laughter of a young girl kept ringing out, and the laughter spread far in the open and broad night sky. The green-haired girl in the boy's arms laughed so hard that tears almost came out of her eyes. Her slender legs swung at a faster frequency, and one of her small hands kept patting the boy's chest. "Little brother, you are really amazing. That guy just now was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He looked like he had seen a ghost." Nian's eyes fell on the girl's tender little face, and he also showed a smile from the heart. It was the first time he saw Luna so happy. "Do a good job for me. When it's over, the boss, will give you a generous reward." Luna smiled and patted Nian's shoulder, and encouraged loudly. "A generous reward? How generous?" Nian couldn't help but let his gaze drift, quietly landing on those lips, smoothed by the moonlight, as if coated in a layer of sweet syrup. The girl's lips were so thin, he hadn't expected her to be so assertive earlier. Truly, she was the boss. "What are you looking at? If you keep looking, I'll bite you." As if sensing Nian's subtle gaze, Lorna stopped laughing, baring her tiny fangs in anger as she glared at him with a hint of malice. Nian shrugged. He couldn't blame him. Just like when he heard about practice, he remembered his aunt's thoughtfulness. When he heard about compensation, he remembered Gwen's beautiful legs. When he heard about preparation, he remembered Kara's strength. When he heard about moaning, he remembered Wanda's obedience. So, when he heard about the current reward, he always remembered the special candy he had eaten not long ago, and the lingering sweetness still lingered on his lips. "If you want the reward, work hard, don't even think about slacking off," Lorna scolded, her arms gently wrapped around Nian's neck, a haughty expression on her face. "You're the boss, you have the final say." Nian smiled and looked ahead at the shrinking city map. He saw a vast, independent urban area bordering the inky sea. Inside, brightly lit, cranes, containers, ferries, and more could be vaguely seen. The private port of the Lux Enterprises the white man had mentioned was almost here. At that moment, Nian turned around, as if sensing something. Behind him, in the sky above the city, dozens of light points lit up one after another, then intensified, steadily approaching. Chapter 140 Superpower arrives, ascends to heaven. Dozens of dense, orderly lights lit up above the city's night sky. Like Nian and the others, they were heading towards the private port. Nian's deep blue eyes reflected the glimmer. They were distinctly different steel armors, their metal shells painted Iron Man's signature red gold. Their feet and hands blasted dazzling flames backwards, their momentum resembling an army of steel. "I knew that guy wouldn't die so easily," Nian muttered, clutching Lorna's lithe body as he effortlessly dodged several passing Iron Man suits in midair. His ability to escape in the form of a 3-in-1 black kitten, even at the hands of his own team, proved that Iron Man Tony Stark's survivability was practically topped off. It would be strange if he truly perished at the hands of a terrorist organization wielding low-level supernatural powers. Bright spotlights hung throughout the Lock's Enterprise's port, and nearly 50 people bustled about the vast area. Between two cranes, 30 meters above the ground, steel wires held the war machine armor aloft. This time, the figure wearing the armor was a cabinet official. The port, completely occupied by terrorists, was preparing for a nationwide live broadcast, a live broadcast of the destruction of war machine and government officials, the very people the US relied on. This was Killian's long-held plan for revenge. He had originally intended to capture the US president directly, but with the recent resurrection of Superman and the rise of the Avengers and Justice League, he feared attracting too many supernatural beings and compromising his plans. So, he settled for capturing a substitute official. Atop a crane, Killian, in a suit and tie, was beside the bound Pepper Potts, directing his men, who had been infected with the extremis virus, via intercom to carry out their plan. Just then, a burst of gunfire rang out from a corner of the port below. Under Killian's furious and hateful gaze, a bandaged Tony Stark rose from the shadows, a circular light from the energy tank illuminating in the center of his chest. He raised his hands, as if throwing a party in a nightclub. "Good evening, everyone. From now on, this place is called Iron Square." As soon as he finished speaking, dozens of Iron Man suits appeared in a cluster, hovering high above the harbor. "Lock on those targets showing signs of heat, and let the party begin. Also, Jarvis, bring me a Mark armor," Tony Stark said coolly. Suddenly, dozens of Iron Man suits of varying styles swooped down on the terrorists below. The terrorists, unwilling to be outdone, their bodies blazing like cyborgs swallowed lava, fiercely engaged the suits in automatic attack mode. Sparks flew, explosions echoed. A war between man and machine was imminent. Tony Stark. Killian chuckled instead of rage. He grabbed his shirt and tore it apart, revealing a muscular upper body with abs. The blood vessels and flesh beneath his skin were like molten lava, causing the temperature around him to rise sharply. Killian naturally possessed the extremis virus, honed through his lifelong research, capable of rapidly healing humans like plants and generating extreme heat. However, his extremis virus was even more refined, not only making his transcendental powers even more powerful, but also unmatched in its stability. Bang! He swung forward with a powerful, high-temperature punch, shattering a normal steel-armored object that had swooped down, melting half of it through. Killian's face flushed red, a sinister smile. He was about to engage in the fierce battle of hunting steel, but just as he took a step forward, his red, scorching body abruptly stopped. Not far behind him, Pepper Potts, strapped to a hanger, was also stunned. To her, Killian stood motionless, like a statue. It wasn't that Killian didn't want to move. It was that he couldn't. The air enveloped Killian like solidified concrete. His eyes darted wildly, and curls of hot smoke rose from his scorching body, like the behavior of a steel-armored vehicle frozen in time. "Don't bother trying. You can't move." Suddenly, from the empty space ahead, a young man's voice echoed strangely. "Who are you?" Killian's eye twitched. "Who?" The young man paused, then replied, "Someone's subordinate, I guess." "Subordinate? Who sent you?" As Killian spoke, terrifying veins bulged from his forehead, neck, and chest. His blood, as hot as molten lava, boiled, threatening to burst forth. He was exerting his utmost strength. Nian, floating invisible in front, shook his head. Of course, his superpowered form wasn't invincible. His physical fitness, for example, was comparable to that of an ordinary human. His superpowered aura ability primarily came in his control, which in turn depended on his distance from objects. At a distance of 10,000 meters, a superpowered Nian might only be able to manipulate an object the size of a cup. At 5,000 meters, he could freely control an object the size of a car. Within 1,000 meters, Nian could control and steer a Boeing airplane or a giant ferry. At 100 meters, Nian could lift a skyscraper by its foundation. As for the range within 10 meters, Nian called it the superpowered exclusive domain. Once inside, multiple force fields intertwined around the body, making it impossible for even light to escape. As far as he knew, no more than 3 people on Earth could escape. Therefore, the superpowered mode was simpler and more unstoppable than any previous mode. Infinite invisibility combined with the exclusive domain. Anyone with a weaker supernatural ability or physique, once found and brought within range by Nian, would be reduced to prey, helpless, unable to even resist. Killian was despairing. The 3 people who had escaped the superpowered exclusive domain were clearly not him. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move an inch. "Killian, you haven't forgotten me, have you?" A childish voice rang out. "It's you." Killian's eyes widened in fear. Though he couldn't see the invisible presence, he recognized the girl's voice. It was her, coming for revenge. Whoosh, a Mark 42 Iron Man suit, currently piloted by Tony Stark, sped up, hurtling towards Killian, who stood motionless on the pylon. But just as it drew within a certain distance, the suit seemed to sink into a puddle of air, and Iron Man froze in midair. "What's going on?" Tony Stark inside the suit was also bewildered. "What should we do with him, boss?" Nian ignored him, whispering, whether in obedience or affection. Lorna gazed at Killian before her, pondering for a moment, then smiled and pointed to the night sky. "Understood." Nian smiled faintly. "Then ascend. Ascend, ascend, ascend." Killian froze for a moment as the words ascend echoed repeatedly in his mind. His frozen body suddenly accelerated and flew towards the night sky above the port. In order to ensure that he could send him to a certain height, Nian carried Luna and flew behind him. "No, stop!" he shouted in panic. Killian's red body flew faster and faster, as if he had turned into a human-shaped satellite, breaking through the clouds thousands of meters above, and continued to rush out of the sky without slowing down. It was like he was flying directly to heaven. Chapter 141 She is the best among us. Killian had imagined he might be defeated by his nemesis, Iron Man, or slain by a transcendent being like Lorna. But he never imagined that one day, he would be abruptly annihilated by an invisible, intangible, mysterious being with a power on a level unmatched by his own extraordinary abilities. Frustration, powerlessness, anger, resentment, regret. Killian, like a crimson rocket, plume of smoke, burst through the atmosphere like a meteorite and emerged into the outer reaches of space. Everything was lost. Not even his wails or cries could be heard. Killian's mouth remained open, his bloodshot eyes wide, his scorching body continuing to float and fly, watching the world before him, its arcing edge of light. Which death was more despairing and terrifying, buried 1,000 meters underground or soaring 1,000 meters into space? Killian had no answer for the question. He was dying. Like a plant without water, Killian's entire body trembled, his mouth agape, his mouth twitching and quivering. Without oxygen, the red glow of his bare torso quickly dimmed, and soon, both the inner and outer parts of his body lost their warmth and light. His dry, cold skin resembled dead grass, and his wide-open eyes lost their brilliance. Driven by inertia, he continued to spiral outward into space, until he vanished into the endless darkness of the interstellar realm. Killing Killian. Nian was far less burdened than killing the mutant doctor. Not to mention that Killian was a terrorist, destined for death sooner or later. It would be better to save him beforehand. More importantly, Nian, like his Aunt Diana Prince, was extremely protective of his inner self. This protectiveness reached an unreasonable level. Even if it violated the laws and rules of the human world, he subconsciously considered it a minor matter. Therefore, disrupting world peace and attempting to conquer Earth was far less worthy than harming Nian's family and those close to him. This angered Nian, making him even more aggressive. He was just an ordinary person, but now that he controlled the extraordinary, there was no need to be timid. He would strike with thunderous force. If someone deserves death, just kill them. Why bother with so much reasoning or waiting for so-called legal action? Nian never considered himself an ally of justice. After all, justice could never judge the superhuman. Not every superhuman was like Superman. The world between superhumans felt more like a return to primitive times, where the strong preyed on the weak and the strong reigned supreme. Whoever had the sharpest claws and the strongest physique would likely stand the test. High in the sky, nearing outer space. Superpowered Nian floated here, holding Luna. The superpowered field formed by his body could store a sufficient supply of air. Standing here, the azure earth lay beneath them, the starry sky clearly visible. The wild wind whipped their hair and sleeves. Ho ha, this is hilarious. Where do you think he will fly to? The girl asked with a laugh. Who knows? Maybe to the god of death, if there really is one, the boy replied nonchalantly. Not necessarily. It could be God. You're the boss, you have the final say. The super-powered Nian lowered his head, gazing at the beaming green-haired girl in his arms. Her smile was a stark contrast to her usual, and under the silvery moonlight, she resembled an innocent elf. Although he personally preferred Lorna's rebellious nature, he still wanted to protect that smile. Before he could even consider it, Lorna, smiling in his arms, suddenly buried herself in Xenian's neck, biting the side like a puppy. Boss Polaris, what are you doing? The super-powered Xenian gasped. His physique was no stronger than an average person's. He had originally possessed a protective energy coating, but after killing Killian, he instinctively removed it. Maintaining a force field was inherently his strongest defense, but he hadn't expected the unsuspecting individuals within it to take action. Ignoring Xenian's words, Luna nibbled at Xenian's neck with her slightly pointed, hard teeth, whispering with an unseen emotion, no matter what happens in the future, I want you to remember me, forever and ever. Remember me as I am now. Xenian was about to say something when he suddenly felt a soft, slippery band-aid covering the painful area of his neck. A cool, tingling sensation covered the earlier pain. Kamar Taj, ancient training ground. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Less than a day. This is too fast. Will it break the Holy Land centuries-old record? With such talent, she might be the best among us. Standing on the ancient training ground, under the astonishing gaze of a group of mages in strange long-sleeved robes, the crimson-faced girl, serene and adorable in her dress, looked like a flawless doll, a stark contrast to the prim and straightened mages beside her. As her two ringed hands swirled and waved, sparks erupted from the low sky ahead, spinning into a wheel and forming a portal leading to the outside world of the Holy Land. In less than a day, she'd mastered the art of teleportation. Even the usually proud and conceited Master Mordo was speechless at such an astonishing talent. The Ancient One's expression remained unchanged, as if he had anticipated this moment. He turned to Wanda, who was absorbed in observing the portal, and asked, How do you feel? Very good, Wanda smiled faintly, gazing at the portal she had created. She thought, this way, I can finish my chores before leaving home, and return home sooner to care for my master. This spell training was fantastic, wasn't it? I wonder what other mages would think if the girl's thoughts became known? This is a power powerful enough to disrupt the world and counter the existence of multiple dimensions. Isn't it a bit extravagant to simply use it as a maid? In Los Angeles. Although they didn't know the exact events, the Fantastic Four breathed a sigh of relief at Victor's burial. Susan. Reed looked at the beautiful blonde next to him, her delicate features, clad in a tight, blue, magical suit that revealed her voluptuous, mature figure. Her golden hair swirled slightly, and his heart raced as he blurted out, Susan, be my girlfriend. Susan shuddered slightly, snapping out of her trance and locking eyes with Reed. Johnny Torch and Ben the Thing nearby grinned and tactfully made room for them. This is definitely not a whim. Reed scratched his head and said sincerely, I know. I'm a nerdy scientist, and I've always devoted my energy to research. But now, after seeing what happened to Victor, I don't want to hide my feelings anymore. It's too late to regret it when I truly lose you. So, Susan, be my girlfriend. Reed's eyes were filled with sincerity as he gazed at Susan before him, his burning passion evident in his words. His hands, trembling slightly, reached for the woman's slender waist. But just as his hands were about to touch, Susan suddenly took a step back, leaving Reed's arms empty. Reed froze, looking at her bewilderedly, his heart sinking. I'm sorry, Reed. Susan's beautiful eyes avoided his gaze. After a moment of silence, she looked up at the night sky and whispered, if you had asked me earlier, even yesterday, I might have agreed. But now, please allow me to refuse. Chapter 142, Master Guyi secretly carries private goods. With a clang, the force field holding Iron Man in the air vanished, and Iron Man, continuing his forward sprint, crashed headfirst into the iron frame Killian had been standing on. The impact sent stars swirling through Tony Stark's eyes in the cockpit, and he tumbled a few times due to inertia before coming to a stop in front of Pepper Potts. Are you okay, Tony? Pepper Potts asked hurriedly. I'm fine. Iron Man climbed to his feet, using his hands to support himself against the iron frame. He used the metal sword on his armored hand to untie the female secretary's restraints, then asked curiously, "Do you know what happened here?" "I think it must be the supernatural force Killian provoked," Pepper Potts said nervously. "Two invisible beings arrived here. From the sound of their voices, it was a boy and a girl. Unfortunately, I was a bit far away, so I couldn't hear their words clearly. I only know that Killian was terrified and couldn't move or resist the entire time. You should have seen what happened next." "Yes, he took off, like a rocket launch." Iron Man shrugged, looking up at the night sky above, his thoughts unclear. Meanwhile, in the vast port area below the two cranes, dozens of Iron Man suits were still battling terrorists armed with the extremis virus, resulting in a massive explosion that ended in a mutual destruction. The number of Iron Man suits and terrorists was dwindling in tandem. Tony Stark showed no sign of distress. If money could buy anything, it was nothing. Furthermore, he believed that with Killian, the leader, dead, the remaining forces would be insignificant and could be quickly wiped out. Tonight's battle had barely begun, and it was already over. The next day, Sunday, in the afternoon. I'm back. Nian, wearing a baseball cap, a mask, and a towel wrapped around his neck, arrived at his door. He opened the door and called inside, but no one responded from the sleek, clean-looking house. "Is no one home? By the way, is the house always this clean when he's not home?" Nian closed the door and set down his backpack. A cat's paw poked out from inside, unzipping it. Little Wong happily slipped into the living room, carrying Kunluo, who was soundly asleep in a glass jar, in his mouth. After a day or two away from home, Little Wong was homesick. "You two, be careful not to mess up the house," Nian warned, casually hanging his unzipped backpack by the door, slipping into his slippers and clattering into the living room. This guy, he had absolutely no self-awareness at all. Xia Ahoy glanced back at him, then gracefully turned and slipped out onto the sun-drenched balcony. How can we not celebrate with some happy water at this time? Nian thought. Since the mistress and maid weren't home, it was a good time to have a sneaky drink. With this thought, Nian headed for the freezer. But before he reached it, a rustling sound suddenly erupted behind him, like countless iron filings hitting the floor. Someone's coming in. At the same time, Guan Luo's mental alert abruptly rang out. Wait, who's that? Startled, Nian turned and saw a hole in the middle of his living room. Countless sparks spun around the edge, a flywheel spinning. From the familiar portal, a petite figure leaped out from the other side, her long crimson hair and the hem of her red dress dancing in the wind. Nian instinctively opened his arms, embracing the lithe figure, somewhat resembling Lorna, into his embrace. The magical portal behind her began to shrink and dissipate after passing through. A spell of Earth's local space? Incredible, rare even in the entire universe. On the balcony, Guan Luo, awakened from his glass jar, opened his eyes and exclaimed in admiration. This family was becoming increasingly terrifying. "Master, where have you been these past few days?" Eagerly throwing herself into the young man's arms, Wanda embraced him tightly, her face raised with worry. "You didn't even tell me." Although she knew this was breaking her housekeeper's rules, Wanda couldn't help herself. As for Nian, who could resist such a sweet, soft, and adorable girl throwing herself into his arms, looking at him with such concern and a touch of coquettishness? "Okay, I'll tell you if I go out again." Nian smiled softly, his palm naturally falling on the girl's crimson hair, feeling the silky and delicious touch. Wanda blushed slightly, but her eyes narrowed slightly, her tiny eyelashes trembling as she thoroughly enjoyed the pat on her head. This was completely different from the boss. It occurred to Nian that if he patted that person's head, they would immediately explode, perhaps even get furious and rub his head. But Wanda, on the other hand, felt incredibly relaxed as she was being patted, her body softening as if surrendered to him. "As for what you've been up to these past 2 days, well, I'll tell you when the time is right." Nian felt a sudden pang of guilt. Could he really tell Wanda about what he'd done these past 2 days? That was debatable. "By the way, did you learn the Ancient One's spell?" Nian asked, slightly slow in reaction, in surprise, looking at the spot where the portal had vanished. Did the Ancient One say it took at least 3 days to learn the portal spell? It hadn't even been 2 days yet. What Nian didn't know was that it had actually taken less than a day. After all, Wanda had already learned it last night. Of course. The Ancient One hadn't lied, he simply included the time Wanda needed to spend on chores and schoolwork. Yes, I learned it for the master. Do you want to examine it? Wanda blinked, her small hand leading Zinnian to the living room sofa. What do you mean by learned it for me? Zinnian felt the words were ambiguous. Perhaps the Ancient One had said something while teaching Wanda, a veiled ulterior motive. He sat Zinnian down on the sofa, which served as the premier audience seat. The little maid, Wanda, stood near the front and took a deep breath. Her delicate, youthful figure was clad in a western-colored dress, her fair, well-proportioned legs clad in translucent white silk. As her delicate, white fingers moved in front of her, a golden sigil, like a miniature round shield, emerged from her palm. The sigil, with its strange patterns embedded within it, rotated mysteriously and autonomously. This is the Ring of Ragadir, a magical shield primarily used for defense. I haven't learned any other offensive spells yet. Little Wanda lowered her head in shame. Really? Not bad, keep it up. The corner of Zinnian's eye twitched. This guy's comparison was truly infuriating. According to Ancient One, just learning the spell teleportation would take him 100 years. 100 years. 100 years. Oh, and I also learned this spell. Wanda, holding a golden spear like a little witch, suddenly closed her eyes, and then her body lost its function and slumped forward into Zinnian's arms. This is. Zinnian's eyes widened, and he faintly saw a hazy shadow similar to Wanda's slowly rising from the unresponsive Crimson Girl's body. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 Dirty Shield. Inside, Zinnian held Wanda's slumbering body in his arms. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but the soulless girl seemed to have grown even lighter. Her breathless, weak heartbeat resembled a lifelike doll. The fading sunlight from the balcony shone on her skin, rendering it translucent and luminous. After all, the Crimson Girl was already incredibly beautiful and adorable, her soft, pretty face fair and delicate, and now she had the demeanor and grace of a sleeping beauty. She wore a gorgeous, elegant dress, draped across Zinnian's lap. Her soft, adorable legs, wrapped in semi-transparent white silk, were slightly raised, and her small, black-booted feet dangled in midair. Her always striking crimson hair, in a staggering abundance, cascaded down her back, spreading like vibrant petals across Zinnian's body and the sofa where she sat. Surprised and curious, Zinnian couldn't help but reach out with his free hand to gently pinch the side of the girl's face. Wanda didn't have baby fat, but her smooth face still had some soft flesh, and her doll-like features were slightly deformed by the finger's play. Ah! Master, don't do that to my body. The formless shadow of a young girl, floating in front of the sofa, cried out in embarrassment and panic. Oh, sorry, my hand. I couldn't help it. Zinnian withdrew his hand awkwardly. He was truly just curious. But pinching the body's owner's face in front of their soul was truly rude. Fortunately, it was his maid. You can pinch other parts, but don't pinch the face. It's a bit embarrassing. Wanda's soul hesitated, then whispered, and the feet, the stockings and boots. I forgot to take them off when I came back. They're a bit dirty. Don't touch them. Zinnian's heart skipped a beat. Although he knew Wanda didn't mean that, her words made it hard not to think otherwise. It was too much to bear. When I pinched your face like that just now, could your soul feel it? Zinnian took a deep breath and returned to the original topic. I can't feel it. Wanda's soul shook its head and whispered. The Ancient One explained that when the soul is out of body, it's generally impervious to physical blows. Only magical or energetic blows can allow the soul to sense them, or even forcibly pull them back. Then wouldn't this spell be very dangerous? Zinnian frowned slightly. If someone caught the soul out of body, even the most powerful wizard could kill it with a single blow. However, since it was a spell, it must have some unique features. For example, permanently separating from the originally decaying body and existing forever as some special spiritual form? Nian's mind flashed, and he continued, what can you do in this soul state? You can pass through any form and ordinary barriers, and you can also come into contact with intangible objects and special energy substances. Of course, Master Ancient One said that this is very risky, so you must never try it alone. Wanda's soul eyes gleamed, and she said thoughtfully, I personally think that the most important thing is that in this soul state without the body, you can perceive the dimensional space of the multidimensional universe more specifically, thereby drawing more power and accelerating your understanding and study of profound spells. Obviously, when it comes to spells, Wanda is a natural genius. Nian was a little confused and his attention gradually wandered. Looking at Wanda's soul, which was talking freely and shining with wisdom in front of him, for a moment he mistakenly thought that what he was holding in his arms was really just a doll. The big hand on the slender legs wrapped in semi-transparent white silk slid gently down along the delicate and slender legs. Right now, my soul can only leave my body briefly. It'll have to return in about half an hour. Wanda's soul continued, its voice growing fainter. Finally, covering her face, she said, "They say, don't touch it. It's dirty." "How could that be?" Nian smiled softly and, with one hand, removed both of Wanda's black boots. As the boots fell off one after the other, two even smaller and more delicate feet, wrapped in white silk, gently stepped onto the sofa. Freed from their shimmering, peanut-sized toes stretched out playfully and joyfully. Since they were near the balcony, the sun, about to set over the city horizon, cast a beam of light into the living room. The sunlight illuminated the delicate feet, making them shimmer and gleam. The white silk and sole seemed so translucent that even the tiny veins within were visible. They seemed not dirty at all. Wanda's soul, floating ahead, flickering and fading, covered her eyes tightly with both hands, as if trying to cover its ears and steal a bell. The soul can't sense physical attacks, right? Such a thought flashed through Nian's mind, and he quickly took a deep breath, calmed himself down, and said, "Okay, come back." Hearing his words, Wanda's soul floated forward and sank, sinking into the body in his arms. The crimson girl's eyelashes trembled slightly, and then she opened her eyes as bright as gems, and her face quickly turned red with shame. "It's too embarrassing to have the master take off your boots. It's definitely a shame for a maid." She quickly jumped down from Nian's arms, picked up the boots on the floor and ran away. Looking at the crimson figure leaving the sofa like a frightened rabbit, Nian couldn't help but smile, and suddenly recalled the last thing Luna said to him last night. "I've tracked down the mysterious force that abducted Pete during the Battle of New York." "What force?" "SHIELD. Lorna's emerald eyes flashed coldly as she spoke. "I'm certain it was SHIELD who abducted Pete. However, this force has the support of the highest echelons of state, and their influence and power are even greater than the military. My forces alone can't investigate further. Leave it to me. I'll find a clue," Nian said gravely. SHIELD. Nian muttered softly, sitting on the sofa at home. This wasn't the first time he'd heard of this force. During the previous Battle of New York, the agents who sealed off and handled the post-war area were agents claiming to be SHIELD. Although there was no information about SHIELD online or in the newspapers, this further confirmed that it was no ordinary organization and might even be closely connected to Avengers headquarters in New York. Regardless, now that it was confirmed that Pete was abducted by SHIELD forces, Nian had to find a way to investigate SHIELD. How should I start? Nian pondered. He'd come into contact with almost every member of the Avengers, more than once or twice, but in different ways. It could be said that Nian was familiar with most of the Avengers superheroes, but not with any of them. He was more familiar with the Justice League heroes, though. After all, Wonder Woman was his aunt, his schoolmate Kara's cousin was Superman, and the kid from the street he'd once entrusted Zia Wong to was the Flash. Chapter 144 Weekend Hell Level. Regarding how to probe the power of SHIELD, Nian suddenly thought of something and asked the balcony outside, "Guan Luo, how many jellyfish clones can you split into?" "I just ate enough energy, so about 99, Guan Luo replied with his mind. "Once I exceed that number, my main body will have to go out and control it." "About 100, that's enough." Nian pondered for a moment, then snapped his fingers and gave Guan Luo an order. That night, hundreds of kilometers from Washington, D.C., in a bar in a New York neighborhood, a white driver, yawning sleepily after a long trip, approached the bar counter and waved, "I'd like a whiskey, on the rocks. Ice or steel?" The black bartender asked. "Ice." "Okay, sir, please wait a moment." The black bartender nodded and began to demonstrate a signature skill of hand-carving ice balls. The white driver didn't bother to spare a glance, his eyes ablaze as he scanned the dazzlingly lit bar. Naturally, he didn't notice that the moment he turned sideways, a black button on his shirt suddenly loosened and fell off, vanishing in a flash, undetectable even by the bar's security cameras. Meanwhile, a small ball, smaller than a coin and transparent, had clinged to the black bartender's white shirt. It quickly faded to semi-white, blending seamlessly with the object it was attached to. Even in broad daylight, if examined closely, it would be difficult to detect. If one were to isolate it, place it in water, and shine sunlight on it, one might discover it was a tiny, iridescent jellyfish. This was Guanluo's clone, a micro-jellyfish. Micro-jellyfish lacked independent consciousness, acting like individual receivers, controlled by Guanluo, the central master. They could move swiftly and nimbly, changing color to camouflage themselves or becoming transparent to conceal themselves. They possessed the power to kill an average adult with a sneak attack. As long as they existed in one place, Guanluo could detect anything within 10 meters, no matter how far away. Most importantly, they were. If a micro-jellyfish were exposed, Guanluo could abandon its fragments at any time, allowing them to regenerate into energy and dissipate into the air. This ensured both safety and secrecy. Even if the micro-jellyfish were to reveal their whereabouts, Guanluo would be unable to trace them back to him, much less reveal the high school student in Washington, D.C., who was behind the operation. This was Nian's first strategy. While somewhat slow, it was safe and reliable, costing Guanluo only a portion of his energy at most. This method was ideal for exploring the hidden SYNOPSIS forces in New York. The area where the New York battle took place has been released from lockdown, but the possibility of SYNOPSIS personnel remaining is not ruled out. We should prioritize reconnaissance there. Stark Industries is also likely to be connected to SYNOPSIS, but they have a lot of high-tech equipment there, so we urge caution, Nian said. Since they had zero knowledge of SYNOPSIS, they would begin by locating their headquarters. Leave it to me. I'm well versed in intelligence gathering, Guanluo replied confidently. And so, that night, there was more than just the previous one. Hundreds of micro-jellyfish, scattered across New York, gradually attached themselves to humans, cats, dogs, and vehicles, gradually analyzing and investigating the city. The workload was undoubtedly enormous. Without Tank Luo and Stero, the real person behind Tank Luo, such an effort would have been impossible. Of course, even with hundreds of micro-jellyfish, investigating most of New York wouldn't be completed in a day or two. Nian could only wait patiently. Elsewhere, the night was deep and quiet. Director, go home and get some rest, said Agent Hill, a woman with a neat short ponytail, as she entered the SHIELD office. You go ahead, I'll be right there. Nick Fury, sitting in his office chair, waved his hand without looking up. After a few seconds, when no footsteps were heard, he raised his single eye and glanced at Agent Hill standing in front of him. Don't worry, this is SHIELD. I'll have a private car on the way home, so it won't be a problem. Okay then, Agent Hill reluctantly nodded and left the office. Alone in the large, deserted office, Nick Fury was accustomed to this. He finished reading the files on Extremis, finally noting the sentence the founder of Extremis was killed by an unseen supernatural being. He casually opened a desk drawer, intending to temporarily store the document there. Suddenly, as if remembering something, Nick Fury pulled another document from the drawer. Unfortunately, a photo fell out as he did so. Nick Fury bent down to pick it up, but before he could do so, he froze. His single remaining eye suddenly widened, catching sight of the ordinary photo of a black-haired boy holding a kitten on the floor. At first glance, it looked unremarkable. Although the kitten looked like an ordinary orange cat, Nick Fury's aching left eye and the scar on it clearly told him it was no cat. Fuck. Agent Hill, exiting the SHIELD main entrance, looked up in confusion. He could almost hear the director's long-lost, piercing curse echoing from the rooftop, hundreds of meters above. Monday morning. Nian, carrying his school bag, headed to school. As usual, he ran into his childhood sweetheart, Gwen, from the next block, and his schoolmate, Kara, from the suburbs. Don't ask, the only thing is, Kryptonians really can do whatever they want. Two beautiful, well-developed blondes, each with their own distinct style, dressed in youthful blouses and short skirts, their legs, clad in white socks and black stockings, respectively, kicked up their legs. They were an undeniably stunning sight wherever they went. However, Nian, walking down the street, could clearly tell that something was amiss at school today. After all, the two weren't bickering and quarreling as usual. Gwen, a bit grumpy, walked ahead the entire time. Kara didn't say much, just occasionally glancing at Nian from the side. "Okay, what do you want? Tell me." Pressured, Nian sighed and laid it on the table. Gwen's eyes lit up, and even as she turned around for a split second, she puffed her cheeks slightly and said, "You must come to my house this weekend. My mom says she hasn't seen you in ages." "Okay. This weekend, even if the world ends, I'll go." Nian raised his hand, a resolute gesture. Kara blinked and smiled. "Senior Nian, my cousin wants to see you too. He said if you don't come this week, he can come." "That's not necessary," Nian interrupted, adding bluntly, "this week. I'll go to Gwen's house on Saturday, and then visit you on Sunday. Is that okay?" "It's settled." Kara smiled faintly, not caring who came first. Then, remembering something, she gently corrected him, "Oh, not to my house, but to my cousin's house." Nian's eyelids twitched. He had a feeling this weekend wasn't going to be easy. Chapter 145. The school has made another move. It was morning, before the first class. Seeing the burly instructor, Roth, beaming as he walked up to the podium, the assembled students fell silent. Nian, sitting in the back of the classroom, felt a jolt of emotion. It seemed as if his suspicions had been confirmed. With both hands on the desk, he cleared his throat before jumping straight into the point. Starting tomorrow, the school will organize groups of students to visit the Oceanographic Museum in the coastal town. Our class is in the first group. We'll leave for the museum this morning and return to school this afternoon, so all you need to do is make some simple preparations. There's no need to bring too much luggage." With that, Roth patted his chest and said solemnly, "The deputy instructor and I will lead the group. Don't worry." This was truly reliable. How could it be? Unsure of what the other students were thinking, Nian's eyes twitched slightly, a sense of foreboding welling up within him. Was the school pulling off another big move? Since the beginning of this year, he's encountered strange and extraordinary things whenever he's out and about. This is especially true of school-organized group activities, where seemingly no event has gone unscathed, though they've all been handled safely. What Nian didn't know was that this was actually a major reason the school had organized this trip to the Marine Research Museum. Ever since the last school-organized group activity happened to coincide with the alien invasion of New York, some students still harbor psychological scars, and many parents have reported that their children are afraid to go out. Coupled with the recent lizard monster invasion, the school's reputation and atmosphere have plummeted to a freezing point. To improve the students' mental health and the atmosphere within the school decided to organize this museum visit. After all, it's late February, spring is warm and blossoming, and the seaside environment is incredibly pleasant. Watching the ocean brings a sense of peace and joy, and in just 2 or 3 months, it will be the scorching summer heat, when swimsuits are welcome. Normally, the news of such an outing would have been met with cheers from the entire class. Because so many extraordinary events had occurred recently, many students looked at each other in bewilderment or kept silent. It was hard to equate happiness and joy to their expressions. Instructor Roth smiled at this and continued, "I almost forgot to mention this. Each student can bring a parent along on this trip, and the school will reimburse travel expenses." "That's great. Can I bring my brother? My dad definitely won't be free on Tuesday, but the school is still okay this time." The students' eyes lit up, finally showing their excitement and anticipation. "Can parents bring along?" Nian was stunned. Generally speaking, parent-child arrangements like this are mostly found in elementary school and are almost extinct by high school. It's probably a special adjustment made by the school during this difficult time. Clearly, this time the school is willing to invest more to improve students' recent misconceptions about school. But if parents can come along, Nian is incredibly reliable. Kara's group was also incredibly reliable. As long as it wasn't the end of the world, they could basically handle it. Instructor Roth glanced at Felicia, who was standing at the classroom doorway, and reminded her, "Deputy instructor, remember to talk to the parents tomorrow to see if they have any requests or suggestions." "Okay, I understand." Felicia, her silver hair gleaming, pushed her black-framed glasses up on her high nose bridge, smiled, and nodded in agreement. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly, and the temperature outside was cool. The class's trip to the Marine Research Museum arrived as scheduled. 4 yellow school buses lined up in the road in front of the school, and the instructor began arranging for students accompanied by their parents to board. "Everyone, get on board. We'll be leaving soon." While chatting with some parents, Felicia stumbled upon a dark-haired boy sitting alone on a communal bench under a tree on campus, his backpack clutched. Her heart skipped a beat. Felicia was about to approach, but a mother and daughter were quicker tracked. Nian. Hearing the pleasant female voice calling him, Nian looked up and saw his childhood sweetheart, Gwen, approaching. Next to her, followed a graceful young woman with curly blonde hair. "Gwen, Madam Mary, good morning." Nian stood up quickly and greeted. "Good morning, little Nian. Why are you sitting here alone?" Mary Jane smiled brightly when she saw Nian, and then asked curiously. "I didn't ask my aunt to join us," Nian replied. "Ah, why?" Mary Jane continued to ask in surprise. "Well, actually, it's the same if you visit alone," Nian smiled. "Recently, Aunt Diana has been dealing with some matters related to the company and the Justice League's site selection. She returned home very late yesterday, so he didn't mention the school trip today because he had already gone to bed." "Mom." Gwen grabbed Mary Jane, who was about to ask more questions, and stole a glance at Nian. Not caring that Mary Jane was still there, her face slightly flushed as she said, "Nian, I'll be with you." Yet, Mary Jane asserted her presence once again, her face brimming with enthusiasm. "We'll be with you. If you don't mind, you can think of me as your mom." "Gwen, I haven't even finished my sentence yet, why are you pulling me?" "Nian. We're getting in the bus first. You should hurry up too." Gwen spoke quickly, pulling Mary Jane away. Nian was a bit amused and embarrassed. He lowered his head and patted the backpack in his arms. "It's time for us to get in the bus, buddy." Meow. The faint meow of a cat emanated from the backpack. Since his aunt wasn't coming, Nian decided to secretly take Wang with him. As for Guanluo, he had to continue investigating SHIELD, so he left him at home. Nian shouldered his backpack and stood up, about to head for the school bus, but he quickly paused. Outside the school gate, a tall, stylish figure leaned quietly. The sunlight and breeze fell on her, making her long, flowing black hair sparkle. The dark-haired woman gracefully raised her hand, gently pressing down on the white sunhat on her head, revealing a pair of bright, heroic eyes from under the brim. And Nian thought he was seeing things and subconsciously rubbed his eyes. But the woman had already stepped in front of him, and gently tapped his brow with her slender fingers, saying angrily, "You've become too independent, haven't you? If I hadn't checked your instructor's Twitter, I probably wouldn't have known about this until the tour was over. I wouldn't dare." Nian blinked, his eyes filled with uncontrollable joy. "Let's go, don't keep others waiting for us." Diana extended her hand to him, and Nian naturally took the warm hand, which seemed larger. Diana was visibly dazed for a moment, then sighed softly, "You've really grown up." Chapter 146. Don't you like it? 4 school buses slowly started off one after another, heading along the main road toward a seaside town in New Jersey. Assistant instructor Felicia was assigned to the 4th bus. It's no secret that beautiful women are incredibly popular, and even though she's not particularly sociable, she easily livens up the atmosphere inside. On the same bus, Nian and Diana boarded the bus a bit late, so they had to sit in the last row. Compared to the bustling atmosphere inside, the two of them sat together in a quiet and beautiful atmosphere. Diana kept glancing out the window at the scenery outside. Golden sunlight shone on her sunhead and white gauze top, casting a golden luster on her sitting form. The brim of her sunhat concealed nearly half of her stunning face, revealing her chin and collarbone as if meticulously crafted by a divine being. Even the slightly loose clothing still highlighted her graceful curves. Even from the front of the bus, Felicia, observing this scene from afar, couldn't help but exclaim inwardly, "What a stylish and elegant beauty." Diana's expression remained calm, as if she didn't care about anything at all. There was a subtle distance between gods and mortals. However, as she turned her gaze from the window to the young man sitting next to her, she couldn't help but whisper, "It's time to let go. So many people are watching." The young man was still gripping her left hand tightly, like a locked lock. Hearing this, Nian's fingers tightened their grip around her palm, and with a rare show of strength, he said, "No." Diana's brow furrowed slightly. Nian whispered, "Don't you like it? If you don't, I'll let go." Diana paused, wanting to say something. From the moment they learned about each other's identities and abilities, through the return to Paradise Island, the evening power training, and the Steppenwolf battle, Nian and Diana's relationship had become extremely delicate. Practice? Was it just practice? Nian and Diana had been deceiving themselves, not speaking out. Whether human or divine, they were subconsciously avoiding the ultimate challenge they would have to face, until now. After all, he, who considered himself to have little self-control, had already sunk into depravity. Obsessed with women? He was happy too. But as a demigod, his self-control was far superior to that of an ordinary human, right? So, if he kissed 10 more times, 100 more times, 1,000 more times, would a god become addicted? Nian didn't know, but he wanted to try. Kiss again and again. Only when Diana was completely unable to leave him, until she was truly lost in the passion, would Nian choose to utter those words. But until then, this alone is enough. Just having you by my side is enough. The dark-haired boy thought to himself, observing the mature woman beside him. Diana fell silent at Nian's words, glancing out the window again. The scenery outside was vibrant and beautiful. It's hard to say you like someone. But how could she possibly say she didn't like him? After about 2 hours of driving, the vast expanse of the ocean began to appear ahead of the school bus, and beside it, a small town basked peacefully in the sunlight. Clearly, the school had chosen this location for the tour with comprehensive considerations. Firstly, the town's location in New Jersey is close to Washington, D.C. Secondly, the town has been relatively crime-free in recent years, making it a perfect place for students caught up in the extraordinary events to relax and unwind. The town, untouched by the commercialization of tourism, exudes a pristine tranquility. 4 school buses raced along the main coastal road at a steady pace, and under the astonished gaze of some local residents, they approached a large building with a blue and white dome, practically built in the sea. That was their destination, the Marine Biology Research Museum. As they were about to leave the main coastal road, a rickety pickup truck passed the 4 school buses. Diana, who had been staring out a window, let out a soft exclamation. "What's wrong?" Nian asked. "Just now, I saw someone I know," Diana replied softly. "An acquaintance. Do I know him?" "Well, kind of." "Who is it?" Nian asked, growing increasingly curious. He leaned his head slightly out the window, but could only see the pickup truck's receding silhouette. "Put your head back." Diana patted Nian's head in a grouchy manner before saying, "That's Aquaman, Arthur Curry. Why is he here?" Nian knew he was one of the current Justice League superheroes. He'd met him last time at Superman Plaza. He was a burly, bearded man, his build comparable to Instructor Roth's. "I remember him saying his home was in a seaside town." "What a coincidence," Diana said softly. "But with the ocean right next door, it's not surprising he'd be here." "That's true." Nian nodded, suppressing a lingering unease. He couldn't be so unlucky, encountering extraordinary events every time he traveled, could he? The school bus arrived at a Marine Biology Research Museum. Museum staff warmly welcomed the instructors, parents, and students. While explaining marine knowledge, they also led them, in groups, into the museum's underwater tunnel. The tunnel was dimly lit, but the sunlight filtering through the water layer by layer created a dazzling display of light and shadow. Schools of fish and marine life of varying species and colors swam and emerged on both sides of the tunnel. Not only the students, but also the instructors and parents were captivated by this vast corner of the ocean. "Those are flounders, so many species, some even inhabit freshwater rivers." Museum staff members kept pointing at the passing fish and chatting away. Nian, holding Diana's hand, walked leisurely behind the crowd. Felicia, observing the two from time to time, frowned slightly. Somehow, watching this heartwarming scene gave her a strange illusion. It seemed as if the two looked more like a couple. How could this be possible? Felicia was startled and quickly dismissed her bold idea. Nian didn't approach the group of visitors who were joined by the museum staff because Diana's knowledge was too profound, her understanding of marine life even more expert than the museum staff's. If you diligently read books for 50 years, you can do the same. However, they were only halfway through their tour of the underwater tunnel. A student suddenly plopped down on the ground, pointing in horror and screaming, "There's a shark!" "Whoa, a shark? Where? Why can't I see it?" Many looked in his direction, only to see the inky darkness of the seabed. Kids, this is the ocean, sharks are common, a museum employee reassured with a smile. The student stammered fearfully, but the shark I saw had arms and legs. How could that be? The students roared with laughter, and many of the parents were amused as well. Only Nian was stunned, a strange image forming in his mind. A shark with arms and legs? No way. Chapter 147 Gwen's coming-of-age ceremony. After a safe and uneventful tour of the underwater tunnel, the two emerged from the tunnel, one after the other. The sea breeze gently blew the woman's long black hair onto the boy's face. His face felt itchy, and the scent of violets lingered. Nian still lowered his head slightly, appearing somewhat distracted. He continued to walk forward like a child, held by Diana's hand. As if knowing what Nian was thinking, Diana glanced back at him and whispered, still thinking about that little episode. Nian nodded, raised his eyes, and a glint flashed in his eyes. Perhaps my classmate wasn't mistaken. After all, he had actually seen a shark with arms and legs. Speaking of which, since leaving the island nation where Stero was imprisoned, he hadn't seen anything about the surviving members of Task Force X anywhere else, not even on television or in newspapers. What happened to them later? Was he reincarcerated in the dreamlike prison designed specifically for serious criminals, sent to Gotham City's Arkham Asylum for psychiatric treatment, or perhaps he'd escaped the control of the U.S. High Command and lurked in some dark corner of the world? Although these were the world's most ruthless criminals, they were all the result of Nian's triadic efforts, forcing him to care. I'll take care of everything, Diana said, gently squeezing the boy's palm. His slender, white fingers succumbed to warmth. She paused, realizing that they had barely let go of each other's hands since getting in the car. It was just that Nian had gone from holding her hand to her own, as if they were accustomed to the intimate physical contact. This was outside the home. Although many parents were holding their children, Diana's heart still fluttered slightly. Auntie. Nian was about to continue his discussion with Diana when a familiar figure, one large and one small, approached from the undersea tunnel exit. Hey, Miss Diana. Little Nian. Mary Jane waved enthusiastically as she approached with Gwen. Miss Diana, good afternoon. I'm so glad you could come and visit the museum. Gwen seemed a little reserved around Diana. Dressed in a black uniform and a short dress, she had the quiet grace of a lady from a noble family, and she bowed politely. Gwen, you're not usually like this. Nian muttered, then paused when he saw Gwen glare at him. Miss Jane, long time no see. Gwen, you've grown up a lot, and you look even more beautiful. Diana smiled, nodding to the mother and daughter in a graceful and polite manner. Gwen put her hands to her slightly hot cheeks, her eyes filled with joy, as if she deeply appreciated Diana's approval. I always thought I took good care of myself, but compared to you, I really feel like I'm getting worse every year, Mary Jane said with a familiar touch, taking Diana's hand. No, you still look very young. Diana smiled slightly. Mary Jane sighed, look, I have wrinkles on my face, but they are not obvious because of makeup. Unlike you, your skin is as bright and fresh as a girl in her 20s. Miss Diana, isn't she only in her 20s? Assistant instructor Felicia, who was passing by, stopped and couldn't help but join in the conversation, looking at Diana with curiosity. She should be only 2 or 3 years older than me, right? Miss Felicia, you don't know that. Miss Diana is at least. Mary Jane stopped talking in time, covering her mouth with her hand, and said apologetically, I'm sorry, I always hate people talking about age, and now I almost fell for it. It's okay. Diana shook her head lightly, let go of Nian's hand without leaving a trace, and gently patted the back of his hand and said, you and Gwen should go for a walk around the neighborhood first, don't go too far. Okay. Gwen's eyes lit up, and she looked at Nian beside her. Go ahead. People your age have more topics to talk about. Mary Jane suddenly remembered something and said to Nian, by the way, little Nian, remember to come over to my house this Sunday for dinner. This Sunday? Nian was stunned for a moment and exchanged a glance with Gwen. They had just made an appointment for Saturday yesterday. Gwen was also puzzled and asked curiously, Mom, why does it have to be Sunday? Mary Jane smiled and said, little fool, did you forget? This Sunday is your birthday, your 17th birthday. Or are you not planning to let little Nian come for your birthday? Oh my god, I almost forgot. Gwen was stunned and slapped her forehead in sudden realization. realizing how embarrassing she had been, in front of Nian's family and the deputy instructor. Seeing Nian's mouth curl up, she almost laughed out loud. Gwen blushed and reached out to grab him and ran out. Auntie, I'm going to go out for a walk first, Nian said hurriedly, turning back. Go ahead, but don't go too far. Diana smiled and nodded, continuing her conversation with Mary Jane and Felicia. The reception hall on the second floor of the Marine Research Museum. Gwen pulled Nian to the railing of the hall. Looking out through the French windows, they could see the fishing dock and the vast blue ocean. It was almost noon, and the sun was tilting towards the west, causing the sea to shimmer. Please, forget what just happened. Gwen bit her lip, her short hair shaking like a rattle, and she let out an imperceptible cry of grief. Oh my god, in front of your aunt. Your careless look is actually quite cute. Nian covered her mouth, patted her shoulder, and said sincerely, don't worry, my aunt won't lower your rating for this. Damn it, laugh if you want. Gwen raised her small pink fist angrily. Only Nian knew that this fist was no joke. Gwen suddenly remembered something and said worriedly, oh no. You already made an appointment with Kara to visit her cousin on Sunday. Nian paused for a moment. I'll explain everything to her tomorrow. Gwen shook her head and said firmly, it's my fault. I'll explain it to her. If possible, she'd like to change it to Saturday. That's fine. Nian agreed. In his opinion, Gwen was his brother, so it didn't matter who explained it. I didn't expect you'd be turning 17 soon. Nian looked at the beautiful girl before him. He didn't know his own birth date, so he never celebrated his birthday. The only special one was Christmas, when his aunt picked him up. For my coming-of-age ceremony, you'd better prepare a good gift. Gwen clasped her hands together behind her back, slightly pushing forward her well-developed chest, pressing herself closely against Nian's body. She lifted her shiny golden short hair from the bottom up, blinked her eyes as bright as gems at him, and whispered meaningfully, when the time comes, I will ask for it together with a previous compensation. Of course. Nian agreed without thinking too much. Chapter 148, Shocking Changes, Kiss and Bite. Okay, we should go back. They'll get worried if we stay out too long, Nian suggested. Okay, Gwen nodded. But then, her spider sense seemed to pick up something, and the barely noticeable hairs on her body stood up. This. Gwen shuddered, her eyes widening as she turned and looked out the museum's floor-to-ceiling windows. What's wrong? Nian, noticing Gwen's sudden change of attitude, immediately followed her gaze. The vast expanse of ocean met her, though the shimmering surface was invisible, as if something was blocking the sun. What's that? Nian looked up in surprise, finally catching sight of the white edge of the ocean's dome. It was the crest of a swirling wave. Amidst its crest, the dark silhouette of a ship could be seen. It was a wave. But it was dozens of times larger than any other wave, sweeping down from the vast depths of the ocean, a terrifying torrent of water, toward the shore. As everyone on the scene witnessed a massive wave, the building itself began to tremble slightly. The wave was approaching with incredible speed. It had initially appeared at the edge of their field of vision, but in the blink of an eye, it had already violently rushed directly in front of them. Nian. Gwen's spider-like reflexes far surpassed those of an average human, and she acted with the utmost correctness. The girl placed her hands on the boy's shoulders, quickly raised her booted feet to the tiptoes, and gently pressed her chest forward against his, desperately and eagerly moving closer. Nian's eyes widened. This moment felt like a race with death, a kiss that threatened death, all the more thrilling and frantic. While their bodies were chilled, they felt each other's warmth. The roar of the tsunami through the window intertwined with the pounding sound of water, which pierced their consciousness. At the same time, from the zippered opening of the backpack that Nian had been carrying, the little yuan-devouring beast king leaped out and bit the exposed back of his neck. The little orange cat's sharp fangs, dripping with saliva, bit through the boy's skin, and a large drop of crimson blood quickly spilled out. At this moment, the reactions of the man and the beast were remarkably consistent. Add buff. Nian gasped, unsure if it was because Gwen had kissed too hard, or if Xiaohong had bitten too deep. A quick glance revealed that tsunami had arrived. The screams of students, parents, teachers, and staff surrounding the exhibition hall had barely begun to rise when they were drowned out by a deafening roar. Boom! A massive tsunami, 20 meters high, crashed into the museum building, its exterior walls and windows shattering like paper. Standing at the edge of a second-floor window, Kissing each other, Xinian and Gwen were nearly swept apart by the rush of water. "Gwen, lend me your body." Xinian felt the strangeness begin to unfold within him, and as soon as he finished speaking, his body dissolved into a pool of black liquid in the seawater. The black, living liquid didn't enter the body of the nearby orange cat as usual. Instead, it surged forward, flowing into the body of the blonde girl in strands. Parasite successful. Amidst the turbid water, Gwen's eyes suddenly widened, a strange black light emanating from them. A tangible pressure pushed the water away. Below the first floor of the museum, a massive influx of seawater suddenly and without warning filled the room, making the museum seem to sink directly into the ocean floor. Mary Jane and Felicia, standing together, were still dazed, and the rush of water nearly knocked them unconscious. This feeling of disorientation lasted less than half a second. Soon, they both felt something like a rope firmly bound around their waists. Felicia strained to open her beautiful eyes, faintly catching sight of a goddess in an armored battle skirt standing nearby amidst the waves. Her long black hair danced gracefully in the water, one hand tightly grasping a piece of sacred golden light. "Hold on." Wonder Woman desperately swam through the murky waters that continued to sweep into the town, using her lasso of truth to snare more students and parents. Bang! Above the massive waves, beneath the gloomy sky, a dark, nimble figure burst forth from the museum's blue-white dome, continuing to break through the surface without losing speed, sending up countless splashes. Gwen, clutching the little orange cat, leaped high into the air. The waves had already submerged the three-story museum, and only just emerged from the massive waves 20 meters above the shore. She seemed to be wearing her usual female spider suit, except this time, the entire outfit, including the hood, was a dark black base. White lightning-like streaks adorned the chest, and 8 dark tentacles, like spider claws, extended from her back. The sunlight shone a cold, metallic sheen. This wasn't just any spider suit, after all, but a biological exoskeleton, formed on Gwen's host body by Nian, using the symbiote's properties. The exoskeleton, transformed into a dark spider suit, tightly wrapped around the young girl's body, merging them like a conjoined whole. The water flowed down along the curves of her slender muscles and limbs, graceful yet wild. This was Gwen at the moment. No, that should be Xinian. Ultimately, this body was controlled by Xinian's consciousness. Just now, Gwen's kiss and Xiaohong's bite had caused Xinian to simultaneously acquire Gwen's spider physique, the Devourer's metamorphic abilities, and Venom's symbiotic abilities. This instantaneous superposition of 3 physical abilities was a first for Xinian. Based on past experience, possessing the abilities of both the Devourer and Venom would drastically alter Xinian's personality, leading to his actions being sinister and arbitrary. This is why the trio is often portrayed as villains. However, this time, Gwen's spider physique was added. Gwen's spider physique was somewhat unique. Individually, its strength wasn't particularly high. However, when multiple high-intensity abilities merge, the spider powers exhibit auxiliary properties of stabilization and cohesion. This was demonstrated in the previous battle with Steppenwolf, where the power of Krypton and the power of a demigod were successfully combined. So this time, aided by his super spider physique, the 2 powers of Elemental Devourer and Symbiote within Xinian experienced their first perfect fusion without any negative effects. With these 2 powers perfectly fused, Xinian then took on the Elemental Devourer symbiote form, coexisting with Gwen as its host. Ultimately, this form emerged, Elemental Devourer symbiote Mother Spider. Spider-Woman, 2-in-1 Xinian. Hey, what's going on? Gwen's thoughts rang out in Xinian's mind. No time for explanations, save people first. 2-in-1 Xinian narrowed his eyes and briefly glanced around. Using Gwen's enhanced body, his wrist swiftly flipped, leaving after images, radiating streams of black spider silk towards the town's high-rise buildings. Chapter 149, Strange Patterns Added Again. Suddenly, countless black threads, centered around Spider-Woman 2-in-1 Xinian, spread outward in the air above the massive waves. These threads, enhanced by the power of Venom, were far stronger than normal, easily stretching 1,000 meters. Within 2 seconds, 2-in-1 Xinian used the hillsides surrounding the town, the tall buildings within the city, and the remaining lighthouses untouched by the waves as anchor points for her threads, weaving a vast, dark web across the coast. And that's not all. Her slender, delicate feet planted firmly on one of the threads, Two-in-one Nian's 8 spider claws on her back moved in unison, extending like sinister spears of darkness, piercing backward into the surging waters, sinking deep into the ground beneath the town's shoreline. 8 dark spider spears shed vast quantities of black silk, which, like a powerfully adhesive black slime, squirmed and connected with each other as if possessing a consciousness of its own, forming a strange, immense barrier that protected the dilapidated Marine Biology Research Museum, now reduced to a single layer. Massive waves roared and lashed against the spider spear barrier, pouring into the town from the empty coastal areas on either side. The seaside town, once peaceful and tranquil at noon, was suddenly transformed into a brutal living hell. The low-rise buildings were completely submerged in the vast sea, the waves continuously destroying buildings and roads. A torrent of ships and marine debris mingled with the tide, drowning everything. Nian had no choice but to find a way to save the people within the Marine Museum, faced with such a sudden natural disaster as the massive waves. Then, accompanied by a shimmering golden light, a tall, beautiful figure emerged from the water. Diana, transformed into Wonder Woman, leaped out of the sea, carrying the water with her. Seeing the black webs Nian had created in the air, she immediately swung her powerful arms upward, and a seemingly infinitely extending rope emerged from the water. Nearly a dozen figures, including Mary Jane, Felicia, and others, were tethered to the rope. Wonder Woman's lasso of truth swung them upward, catching them on the sticky black silk. Drenched to the skin, they felt as if they had seen the light of day again, basking in the sun while constantly exhaling seawater. Wonder Woman only half emerged from the murky waters. The silver crown adorning her smooth forehead gleamed, her wet black hair cascading into the water like a waterfall, and the lasso she clutched, like a golden dragon, sank back into the sea. Wonder Woman looked up and exchanged a glance with Nian, who stood in the black web, a two-in-one body. Without further ado, they nodded in tacit understanding. Wonder Woman took a deep breath and continued her descent into the seabed. While the museum, protected by the dark barrier and safe from the subsequent impact of the massive waves, remained in imminent danger for ordinary people underwater. Now was the beginning of a race against death. Let me think, what should I do? The two-in-one Nian narrowed his eyes, gazing down at the garbage-laden sea below. He wasn't alone in his thoughts, Gwen was also offering suggestions. Let's do it this way, Nian quickly decided. He first detached his 8 spider claws from his back, then closed his eyes. Gwen's spider sense, now in a strange state of symbiosis, expanded like an electrostatic field, seeping through the seawater and quickly covering the sunken museum site. Ruins of buildings, marine debris, marine life, and even humans. The shapes and locations of objects within the spider sense range all appeared in Gwen's mind. Because Nian and Gwen were in a symbiotic state, their thoughts were connected, so he received the information directly. It was a truly subtle feeling. After all, Nian wasn't a true symbiote, but a human possessed of its powers. It was as if the souls within each other's bodies, inextricably linked by their symbiotic connection, were connected. This is much simpler. Nian muttered to himself, and with a swift flick of his wrists, he shot 2 dark threads towards the sea surface directly below. Puff. The black threads completely submerged in the water for about half a second. Nian lifted his hands upward, and as the surface of the sea was simultaneously broken, 2 webs emerged, resembling black fishing nets, one on each side entangled with 5 or 6 soaking wet students and parents. It was a bit like a game of catch. Those captured from the sea were placed on the black webs. Nian repeated the same pattern, and in less than half a minute, he had scooped up nearly everyone in the museum area onto the massive web. Wonder Woman also dived into the water to rescue some ordinary people who were more difficult to retrieve from the rubble. And so, you can see, a black spider web hung suspended over the town, unreachable by the massive waves. Hundreds of ordinary men and women lay entwined in it, like a flock of humanoid fish drying in the sun. The scene was both spectacular and bizarre. Nian glanced at the people on the web and saw that most of the students and parents had been rescued, with the exception of Instructor Roth. He had likely been swept elsewhere by the massive waves, making his chances of survival very unlikely. Don't worry, he survived the Battle of New York, so I'm sure he'll be alright this time too, Gwen reassured. I hope so, Nian nodded. At that moment, the town approached the side of the mountain. With a loud bang, a towering, imposing shark figure burst from the surging waves and landed on the unsubmerged mountainside. It had arms and legs, and upon leaving the water, It switched to walking on land, carrying a burly human on its shoulders. If not Instructor Roth, who else could it be? A mysterious shark tossed Instructor Roth to the ground, causing him to spit out a large mouthful of seawater. Once he regained consciousness, he looked at the shark, curled up into a ball, and cried out in fear, "Don't eat me. I'm disgusting. Who wants to eat you? If it weren't for you, smelling like the boss. Forget it." Shark King Nanavi pulled up his jeans, stood there stunned for a moment, then touched his stomach and continued diving into the waves. Sharks can talk. Instructor Roth stood there, stunned. Watching the town below, half destroyed by the massive wave, Gwen, possessed by Nian, had a cold look in his eyes. As he delved deeper into the world beyond the supernatural, he could vaguely sense that this was likely no ordinary natural disaster. Who was the supernatural being capable of such a feat? Nian didn't believe the Sea King, at least not at the moment, possessed such capabilities. What's that? Nian glanced up, seeming to sense something. He could see a distant sea ahead. Amidst the still growing waves, a graceful female figure darted freely through the turbulent waters. "Gwen, tell my aunt to stay here and wait for me." Nian narrowed his eyes. Gwen realized what he was about to do and instantly called out in her head, "Wait, don't go over there." As soon as he finished speaking, a ball of black liquid quickly peeled off Gwen's body, transforming into a thin, pitch-black spider silk that shot towards the figure in the depths of the sea at an extremely fast speed. Chapter 150 The Sea Queen parasitized by Nian. Near the coast, amidst waves powerful enough to easily destroy towns and mountains, a stunningly beautiful woman swiftly traversed the surging waters. She appeared to be in her early 20s, the perfect age for a woman approaching maturity. Her hair, a vibrant, flowing crimson like seaweed, was clad in a green-scaled battlesuit that clung to her graceful frame. Perhaps due to her lack of sun exposure since birth, her neck, hands, and face, exposed to the water, were as white as pearls freshly plucked from their shells. The light reflected from the water cast a shimmering luster on her skin, as if a gentle squeeze could produce water. This was especially true of her chest. The green-scaled battlesuit only covered most of it, revealing only a small corner of her round, white sphere, yet still offering a vivid sense of the ocean's vastness. A stunningly beautiful face, a voluptuous figure. If only her long, slender legs were replaced with a fishtail, it would satisfy all human fantasies and desires about the legendary mermaid. Horizontal ellipsis. That guy actually did it. Mara, sprinting through the massive waves, glanced sideways at the utterly destroyed human town she passed. Although she had long known that Orm had been trying to provoke a war between the sea and the land, she hadn't expected it to happen so soon. It would soon, and there would be no time to inform Arthur, the land-dwelling Sea King. "We must find Arthur quickly. Only he can prevent the coming war." Mara muttered anxiously, but at that moment, she felt a chill on the back of her neck, as if pricked by something. Mara frowned, instinctively glancing back and touching the back of her neck. "Is this an illusion?" Mara murmured softly, swimming along the nearby mountain road without slowing down. Her arms and legs were pressed together seamlessly, making her graceful, voluptuous body move like a shimmering green arrow through the sea. However, just 1,000 meters ahead, from deep within Mara's body, or perhaps from within her mind, a young man's voice suddenly and clearly echoed, "Who are you?" "Who?" Mara's delicate body trembled, and she immediately stopped in the huge waves. With a slight lift of her white hand, the surrounding water quickly retreated, forming a small, waterless space. The surrounding waves continued to rage, but the waterless area Mara was in was surprisingly calm, as if controlled by a mysterious force. "I know who you are, Mara. The daughter of Nereus, the current king of the kingdom of Zabel, and the fiancée of Orm, the temporary leader of Atlantis. Not only is she an ordinary underwater dweller who can live freely 10,000 meters under the sea and move super fast in the water, but she also has an exclusive talent, controlling the shape, density and hardness of water." The boy's voice whispered in her mind, and then she muttered thoughtfully, "It turns out that the Atlantis Empire that sank to the bottom of the sea is still there. Who are you? Why do you know about me?" Mara looked around in horror. "No need to look. I'm inside you," Nian said bluntly. "As for why I know your identity, well, you told me." There was so much information so stimulating and explosive that Mara didn't know which piece of information to shock her most. "You? Why are you inside me? When did I tell you?" Before answering your question, Answer mine first. Xinian's voice continued to echo in Mara's mind. Tell me, was this tsunami caused by your forces? Mara's intuition told her that the being inside her body was dangerous, so she replied, I don't know. Xinian pondered for a moment, then smiled. So, the mastermind behind this is that Orm, your fiancé? He's the interim leader of the Atlantis Empire and wants to provoke a full-scale war on the land world. How do you know this? Mara clutched her head in pain, exclaiming in surprise, realizing something. You read my thoughts? That's not reading, it's just sharing, the young man replied softly. Having acquired the abilities of both the devourer and the symbiote, Xinian attached himself to Mara, using her as his host and parasitizing her. Therefore, Mara's deepest thoughts were like an unprotected safe, easily accessible to Xinian, the symbiotic leader. Of course, if Xinian chose to fully control Mara's body and deepen the symbiotic union, some of his thoughts would also be accessible to the other. This is the most obvious pro and con of symbiosis. While telepathic communication allows the two to exchange thoughts, it also carries the risk of leaking secrets. Therefore, Xinian generally avoids inhabiting others, especially strangers. If it weren't for his desire to uncover the cause of the tsunami, and the fact that his spider powers protected his mind from the negative effects of the fusion of multiple abilities, he would never have chosen to inhabit Mara's body symbiotically. So, you're also on the Om side. Xinian continued, directing Mara's thoughts in that direction to gather intelligence. No way, Mara gritted her teeth, struggling. Get out of my body. It's really not. Xinian suddenly realized, having stolen Mara's thoughts. Mara and Vico, the current Atlantean military advisor, were not pro-war Orm. They didn't harbor any aversion to humans, but were secretly aligned with the Grand Prince. The Grand Prince was the illegitimate son of the former Atlantean queen and a common human. He was now Aquaman, a member of the Justice League, Arthur Curry. Mara and Vico both wanted Aquaman to return to Atlantis and reclaim the throne from the now powerful Orm. Unfortunately, Aquaman, haunted by his mother's murder, still resisted the Undersea Empire. Since Aquaman doesn't want to return, why bother him? Xinian muttered. No matter what, this is his responsibility. Mara snorted, then replied, you already know everything you need to know. Can you leave my body now? Xinian fell silent, thinking. Leaving Mara's body meant entrusting the future to Aquaman. I hope Aquaman Arthur can pull himself together, return to Atlantis, defeat his powerful brother Orm, and then seize control of the Empire, putting an end to the war between the sea and the land. Sounds good. After all, Aquaman is a pretty good superhero. Too bad, Xinian never pinned his hopes on others. Especially since the tsunami disaster caused by Orm fell on him. So, it's no wonder he intervened. What's going on? Mara opened her beautiful eyes wide, only to discover a dark liquid continuously oozing from her body. This viscous liquid coated her skin and her suit, condensing into a full-body, dark, tight-fitting suit. The suit had white lightning on its chest, a spider mark on its back, and several dark tentacles appeared and disappeared. Muscles swelled slightly, then quickly returned to their previous slenderness, but her strength continued to accumulate, increasing her physical strength to an incredible level. Meanwhile, Mara felt herself losing control of her body, her soul and spirit being pulled away by another being, unable to control this final, symbiotically strengthened form. Xia Ahurong's primordial energy, Venom's symbiotic energy, and Mara's water control, three completely incompatible racial abilities, aided by her spider-like physique, converged in a single body. Mara's and Nian's minds intertwined and tangled. The darkened Mara opened her eyes, her body now under Nian's perfect control. What do you want to do? Mara's mind cried out in alarm. Don't you know? Nian demanded, steering the darkened Mara towards the deep sea, speeding through the waters several times faster than before, like a streak of crimson-black lightning. He knew what Nian was thinking. Mara's heart was like a raging storm, and she wouldn't be able to calm down anytime soon. This time, the sea was about to be breached. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.